And then we'll do the 3 Adeptus factions, and then afterwards we'll do Militarum, Grey Knights, Imperial Knights, and Agents.
All right.
You're not worried that the agents will take up a whole hour by themselves?
No, I'm pretty sure they won't.
I don't know if I get on my soapbox.
That's true. I mean, during my notes, I mentioned like Ordo Xenos Alien Hunters. It's Temu Deathwatch.
Yeah.
Welcome to Preferred Enemies, the Warhammer 40k podcast that prefers its fascist governments fictional. I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin.
Dennis.
And Richard.
And yes, if you didn't guess by that, we're going to be talking about Faction Focus Imperium. Yes, the Imperium is a terrible place to live, and we're going to be talking about the forces that defend it that aren't mostly Space Marines. We will be talking a little bit about Space Marines because there's one we haven't covered yet. But first, before we get into our main topic, I wanted to talk about the new preview that we had on the 16th of January from the, it wasn't from the U.S. Open in Palm Springs, but it was broadcast during the U.S. Open from Palm Springs. But it was broadcast from the UK. But we did get to see some new details on the Astral Claws, or the Red Corsairs, I should say, is their new name. The Red Corsairs box for Chaos Space Marines, and the Eldari Corsairs box, the Eldritch Raiders Battle Force for Eldari Pirates, along with some of the new units they're getting. A little bit more detail on the Maelstrom box set, and some other things as well that I don't think we were expecting. So, first off, those Red Corsairs, we mentioned that their apothecary looks like he's loving life and loving his job. Honestly, that entire set looks awesome.
Yeah. I like the fact that it is Trader Marines, but not explicitly Chaos Marines, which is kind of nice. It's just a nice kind of in-between aesthetic. You can get some of the Primaris style armor and sizing without having to do all of the skulls and horns and stuff like that. It's just a cool aesthetic, and alien allies and stuff is really cool.
Yeah, the alien bounty hunter enforcer and the weird 6-eyed dog that they have. Or the ship captain, her model looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
On that floating dais with the screens and everything. All of the models in that set just look fantastic. We're getting a new Red Corsairs Raiders box, which is an again, it's Chaos Space Marines, but not as spiky, and with their gear looking more cobbled together from various marks, which they should, because it's all stolen scraps.
Yeah.
That set looks really nice. The new Reeve captain they have also looks like he's loving life and loving his job. Just the unhelmeted, he just has the biggest grin, and it's great. You got to see, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life, and this guy is definitely on that path. And then an upgrade sprue with both Terminator and regular shoulder pads and some new heads and chain weapons and trophy and ammunition belts and a bunch of decals. It looks like a really good set and a nice revision of the Chaos look. Again, for people who maybe don't want their army looking so amazingly extra, they do want something that looks more like just renegade Space Marines, and this fits the bill nicely.
Also, the executioner, the Corpse Master.
Yes.
That guy's going to become a master of executions in my World Eaters army.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that he's just made for the job right there.
Fantastic looking models.
And then the new Eldari Corsairs, Dennis, as you guessed, we get a new Prince Iriel, who cannot put away that damn Spear of Twilight. He's probably cursed again.
I think that when the curse was removed, it was probably removed for good, so he should be fine.
Well, we'll see what happens. But he still has the traditional dual back banners that he's always had. They do have a helmeted option for him, which is nice, which looks a lot more like the Vizark for the Inari. It's got that same kind of detailing. they get something that they used to have back in the Forge World days, jump Corsairs with the wing packs.
I like that those guys are back. However, I definitely like the aesthetic of the Swooping Hawks better because these guys, I mean, it just looks like I've got 2 wing blades on my back that are pointing up. So, I mean, they're okay. The rules are probably going to be good for them because the rules in Forge World were good for them. But aesthetic wise, I think I do like the Swooping Hawks with actual wing-looking wings better.
Yeah. But no, these still look good, and they still have the same kind of mix of weaponry that we see with the regular Corsairs, because you see a little bit of like Drukhari weaponry, like a shredder mixed in. They've got a new Psyker, definitely not a Farseer. It's a Void Dreamer, but a real throwback to some old Eldari designs with like the big old like bug eye helmet.
Yep.
Do like
Again,
that.
I'm glad they brought the Void Dreamer back, but I don't know that I like the aesthetic of the model as well as the current Farseers.
Right. But it's nice to see that the older aesthetics are not being discarded. They're just being kind of updated with better modeling now.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. Well, especially since you couldn't even get Forge World. So these were probably in the making for a few years because they took the Forge World stuff down a while ago.
Yeah.
I think they just had to wait until they got this into their cycle, which I'm glad these guys are finally getting back, because back in the day, you could build a whole Corsair army, and currently in with what we've got, you can build a couple units. So I don't know if this is going to be enough to flesh out a whole Corsair army. Well, maybe at 1,000 points, but it's at least a big start.
Yeah, and we don't know what detachments we're going to get. We know this is going to come with a detachment book, and if it's like the ones for 500 Worlds, they'll be released for free online. I think they already said they were going to do that. But I would not be surprised if we get a full-blown Corsair detachment that makes Corsairs, which are being also being included that box, but I'm sure that the Corsairs box will probably get either a re-release or just another push of release, like just to get more copies out. But I would not be surprised if you could build make them battle line and build a Corsair detachment, since they also have their own vehicle now, the Starfang. And the Starfang's cool because it's also the same kit that gives us a new Viper, finally, after all these years.
I mean, I'm torn. I admit the new Viper model looks cool, but I still have my old Viper and it looks nostalgic. I mean, the biggest change is instead of the back of it being a guy sitting in a chair with a weapon mounted there, now it feels like it's more, it's still raised a little bit, and the guy's still sitting inside of it, but it's more enclosed with the weapon up there. So
yeah, it's like a second cockpit. Yeah.
So it's a lot more protected as opposed to just a guy in a chair.
Right. And it looks like if you take that turret, that little secondary cockpit, and flip it around, you end up with the Starfang, which is the Corsair version, which looks like it has a little bit of different modeling on the front cowling, because there's like some extra little gold details, like raised details there. But I don't know what I think about having a rear gunner and the guns facing backwards, but I don't know. I really do like the new Viper, though. Yes, the old ones are nostalgic.
Classic.
Yeah. But they also mentioned that you can now have a underslung missile launcher.
Yeah, that's
on the Viper.
What I'm most curious about. If that's going to be a new change to Eldari 11th, that the Viper gets better weaponry, because it used to only have like a shuriken, catapult, or cannon were your 2 options for the bottom gun. So if you can add in a missile launcher there, that means you could have 2 pretty much heavy weapons on it, and that would be a lot better than it is now. So
yeah. So I have a feeling Eldari players will be pretty happy with the new options. Yeah, and then I think Chaos Space Marine players should be actually they'll have slightly less to complain about, maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
we can't be
Kevin,
be happy. Yeah, we can't be happy, but we'll be less annoyed for briefly.
Right. The thing I'm most excited about, and hopefully whenever we're able to review the book, we'll have more detail on it. But the Maelstrom book itself and the Crucible of Champions book, which allows you to make your own character units, and just the examples they list: a Ravenwing librarian on a bike. We don't have bike librarians right now at all. a rogue trader with a pair of Inferno pistols, a Crutox rider with a rail rifle, an Astra Militarum officer and a sentinel, a psychic Tyranid artillery beast, and a grot with big ideas.
We already have a red gobbo.
But now you can actually like custom build your own red gobbo.
Yeah, I'll say when this was announced, our Dallas little play group I've got here, the things they talked about were one, the character creation, but more so the 3 and 4 player games that were announced. So I think when we are able to dig in more there, I do want to see what those are all like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's some really cool stuff coming down for fun play styles, something that's different than just, match play, and also something that looks like it's different than the past Crusade books also. So I'm very excited to see what's coming down the pipe. And I know this is kind of the end of the edition release, but I kind of like what we're seeing with like, let's throw everything at the wall and have fun with it. And just, I have a feeling, matched play is kind of like, it is where it is. We'll have to see if 11th edition continues with like the mission decks and things like that. Oh, please don't. Or if you are going to do it, make enough of them. But
right.
You can say that with all their stuff. Please just make enough.
Apparently, was it Shadow Vault for Kill Team went up for pre-order and it's gone. So
was that the one that was gone in 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
It disappeared almost instantly. Same with the battalion boxes for 500 or for 500 worlds, I should say. The like the Necron one with all the destroyer cult stuff, gone, like almost instantly gone. Either that or scalpers are a massive problem. We don't know which. Could be a little bit of both. Both.
Yeah.
We even get a couple of battalion boxes for the Maelstrom with Drukari, which looks to be primarily almost actually entirely witch cult. And you get Oops All Steeljacks for the Leagues of Votann box.
I
don't hate that.
I'm happy, but at the same time, Steeljacks were so hard to find when Votann first came out.
Now you know why. They were loading them all into this battalion box.
I guess so. But yeah, so anyone who doesn't have Steeljacks, the battalion boxes will probably be a good deal. So I think it's 6 in there?
Yeah, 6 plus a Memnir strategist and a unit of Hernkin Pioneers.
Yeah, the Steeljacks are, this is pretty much 2 boxes of Steeljacks with a leader you can have on them. If you don't have any, this is going to be a great box. And the Pioneers, maybe they'll get good in 11th.
I think the biggest thing they announced, though, was not something for 40K technically. It was technically a Horus Heresy release, although one that is very usable in 40K. And that is Plastic Adeptus Custodes. Well, we already had Plastic Adeptus Custodes. No, these are new, better proportioned Plastic Adeptus Custodes, complete with plastic vehicles and it is a Contemptor, but it's
they're custom Contemptors.
The Achilles and Gladius.
Yeah, which are such cool models. So
yes, I have one of them.
Yeah, I have both of them in Forge World resin, and they're nice. But these look like they're so much more customizable, posable.
The Forge Worlds were super customizable and posable, so much so that I couldn't figure out how to get them to be in whatever pose I wanted, so I just have mine standing up straight.
Yeah. And it also, I could be wrong, because I don't know if they specifically said this, it looks like it's a dual kit?
That would make sense. Because the only thing that's really different is the weapons.
Yeah, it makes both the Achilles or the Galatus, yeah.
Yeah. And then Jump Ventari. Oh, love their Jump Infantry. Getting that in plastic.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad. I still have my Forge World of those, but the rules went away-ish, so I didn't build them. So I'm like,
And 2 different Caladius tanks.
Yeah.
That was the big thing, because Forge World was the place you could get only place you could get those in the past.
Yep.
And every Custodes player was getting those tanks because they were solid vehicles, and being Custodes, great saves, hard to dislodge. It was the core of most Custodes competitive armies.
Oh, absolutely.
In 40K, like as far as like 40K plastic vehicles, you just had the Land Raider, and the Land Raider is a Land Raider, which means it's expensive and not
you
good.
Also have a Sisters of Silence Rhino.
Right, for custodes.
Still not making a good case for yourself.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'm agreeing with Kevin. I'm just trying to.
One thing that I thought was crazy, though, is they showed in the preview, they showed like the actual plastic models side by side, and I think it's the carrier. I forget which one.
Yeah,
it
the
is.
Coronus.
The Coronus is gigantic. It is insane how big that thing is.
It's basically the Orion. Is it the Orion I'm thinking of without wings?
Yeah. It is.
I have an Orion
nuts.
with wings.
See, now it makes me think that eventually they're going to do a plastic Orion too, which I'm cool.
No, because they're trying to get rid of flyers.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, like all their stuff looks fantastic. The new Custodes, like I said, they have better proportions. It's kind of like what they did with Stormcast Eternals when they went from like the original to the new like Thunderstrike armor, where they're a little bit taller, a little bit leaner, but hyper detailed, but easy to paint because it's all gold.
Here's
The
the
new
problem
shield
I have.
captain
The
looks
new
awesome.
ones is the old ones were already really detailed. And these new ones look even more detailed, which is just like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of painting details.
Yeah.
I miss my flat spaces.
But like even on
here's the thing.
even on the preview, they were just like, yeah, but it's detailed, but you could still just put down like Retributor armor and it's like Reichland Flesh Shade and call it good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. Do that like base gold, Reichland Flesh Shade, and then like a little bit of like silver or dry brush, and you're golden.
Literally.
But no, the new shield captain and like the guys with they just look so cool. These models are so good. Like the one of the memes that's been going around and obviously related to the other thing we'll talk about is the last like shield captain that they released for 40K versus the new one, and it's like
the Danny DeVito shield captain.
the Danny, and it's this is so much better looking.
Yeah.
And I know they tried to defend it, saying it's just the pose that makes him look short.
Nah, the proportions are still weird on that figure. It's a weird sculpt.
It's like if a Votan was a custode.
Yeah. On the other hand, we get a mix of helmeted and unhelmeted heads for the Custodes. And finally, working with something that has been established in the lore, there are female heads mixed in. And obviously, the internet blew up. Because people are just like that sometimes. So they released a side article about these new Custodes. Your question's answered. Let's address the Telemon in the room, shall we? Yes, some of the awesome new Custodes miniatures are female. Is this a new thing? Well, yes and no. And just mentioning that, up until now, we've only had male unhelmeted heads, but you can't tell on Custodes who are helmeted. They can all be mixed. And also specifying that so they did say Space Marines are all male, but they also mentioned that the process to make a Space Marine is terrible and they're all child soldiers. Whereas Custodes are all bespoke custom creations that are superior in every way. And like, well, aren't they made of the sons of Terran houses? Yeah, but you run out of sons eventually. So
I would say probably about 10,000 years ago, they probably ran out of like originals.
Right. Yeah. And then like, how different are they? Not really at all. There's no difference in how effective they are. They are all flawless creations. Yeah. And can I be Custodes when I grew up? No, if you can read, you're too old.
Oh. So if I never learned how to read, I could no.
Yeah. We only take the illiterate to be custodians.
Right. No, I think it's cool. Like, obviously, more options are good. And in general, anybody that has an issue with 40K lore changing, you clearly are not paying attention. Like,
right.
It's all fictional. It's all made up. If they decide tomorrow that Call figured out a way to make female Space Marines, congratulations, they can start doing it.
And also with these Custodes, they did clarify that yes, the models will be usable with 40K rules. Now we don't know how that applies to like the Caladius and the special Contemptor Dreads and like the Coronas. Like, are these going to be still Legends rules, which they're not now technically? What's going to happen? But they also mentioned a rules update for Adeptus Custodes is set for later this year, without saying that there's a new edition coming and Custodes are probably going to be one of the earlier codexes, unless it's a complete complete revamp, which please don't be.
Yeah, and my concern with that, I don't think it'll be the full revamp. I'm still sticking to that. But my concern with Custodes is I think they want to keep 40K and Horus Heresy separate. So yeah, I see all of these things going into Legends. I mean, which will be bad for competitive side, but for Crusade and narrative stuff, a lot of people allow Legends units in those, so it won't make much impact, and it'll be still a cheaper way to get all of these than if you were to try and get Forge World, which you can't anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, it's just like having all this stuff in plastic, like this is a huge thing. This is absolutely huge, both for Horus Heresy players and for 40K Custodes players. I think this is a big deal. And in fact, it's such a big deal that they're our first faction on our faction focus Imperium. As I kind of alluded to earlier, the Imperium is a terrible place. It is run by an authoritarian government. It is far fallen from what the Emperor of Mankind envisioned when he sent out the Space Marines on the Great Crusade 10,000 plus years prior. So what you have now is not, I wouldn't say exactly rickety, but an empire that is held together by xenophobia and bailing wire.
So, Pancreas No Work on YouTube just released a video like yesterday about why hasn't the Imperium fallen, and his main like conceit or their argument in the article is that like, oh no, the Empire's already fallen. Like the Imperium's fallen. It's just a galaxy spanning thing that has like millions of worlds, so it takes time. Like
it
you
is
were
dying,
seeing,
basically.
It is like basically his argument is it's dead. It's just going to take a while for all of the limbs to realize that the brain is dead. Like
right.
is really kind of what's going on, which I thought is a very interesting way of looking at it because it's still fighting, you're still doing all your stuff, but yeah, it's like no, they've already lost. It just takes a little while to figure that out.
Right, and yet with all that and with all the threats that we have covered in our faction focuses on Chaos and Xenos, and even taking into account the forces we covered in faction focused Space Marines, there's only so many Space Marines. Yeah. And there's a lot of Imperium to try to protect, and if you're a Booty Gilliman, to possibly try to resuscitate. I do think that that's kind of like if nothing else, he's trying to do triage, but I think he might actually be like, especially with the push to reclaim Ultramar, I think he's trying to figure out how to recapture what it once was, which is practically a second Great Crusade in and of itself. But over the past 10,000 years, several, and some predating that, predating the actual like Horus Heresy, there are a number of factions within the government and within the various organizations of the Imperium of Man that have been created or have risen up to maintain, manage, defend various aspects of human existence and of the Imperium. And we're going to start off, as I mentioned with our segue, with the Adeptus Custodes, which are the ones I would say that are closest to the Emperor himself. And that is because they are literally the Emperor's bodyguard. They were colloquially known as the 10,000. We don't know exactly how many there are at this point. They are still making them. Although, unlike Space Marines, as I mentioned earlier, these are all very carefully crafted through like genetic and like cellular recoding. This is not some crude more organs equals more humans process like we mentioned with Space Marines. These are all built from scratch from infants. And yes, there are male and female Custodes. If this bothers you, I guess put them all in helmets and get over it. Because the models are there, the lore is there. That's what it is. Yeah, again, your hobby is your own. If you don't want to use the female heads, no one's forcing you to. There's plenty of helmets. And there's male heads too, so you'll be fine. This is definitely the best armed, best armored faction in the Imperium, given that their official job is to guard the Emperor. They have the best power armor. They have the best weapons, they don't have time to carry separate bolters, so all their melee weapons are also bolters. They're all carrying gun blades. They're the ultra weebs.
Now, the best description I heard is that what a space marine is to like a guardsman, a normal baseline human, is what custodes are to space marines. So,
Yes.
like, that's that's how space marines are the ultimate, like, badass warriors that, can do anything. And custodes, like, are that much better than them.
Right. Yeah. It's like each individual custode is a force in and of themselves. And that's one of the reasons why when you see them, they're generally either running around solo or in squads of like maybe 3, 6 if they're very lucky. Like a squad, like in the lore, like a squad of 6 custodies would be terrifying. Like there's very little that could withstand it. But they do also have access to like weaponry that most factions of the Imperium have no access to. They even have access to the best old school dreadnought chassis, because again, if a Custodes is so wounded that they can't physically fight anymore, but they're not dead, why waste them? Because they're also all geniuses, because unlike the forces of like the Space Marines who are dedicated to only war, the Custodes are also trained in logistics and administration. Like they are like fully realized superhumans. They are good at everything.
It really does like make me kind of buy into the whole like thought of, because there's a theory that like after the Great Crusade that the Emperor was going to Thunder Warrior all the Space Marines, and the amount of attention and care and like work that went into Custodes versus Space Marines kind of makes me believe that.
Yeah.
that was always the plan. It's like, oh, this is the blunt tool for conquest, and these are the guys that are actually going to be running my Imperium afterwards.
Right. If you want a really good book on the Custodes at the time of the Horus Heresy, I recommend The Master of Mankind by Aaron Dembski Bowden. Besides the fact that ADB is a fantastic writer, you get a lot of detail on the Custodes as they are fighting demons in the Webway who got in because Magnus did everything wrong. And you get like, there's like a Custodes in there who literally gets part of his brain destroyed by an attack, and he's still able to fight. He kind of doesn't have, like, if you look at him, his eyes kind of aren't focused on anything, but he has lost none of his martial skill. The man is still a blunder.
I don't know. I think that's scarier, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like this dude who can't quite focus on me but is still whooping my ass. I don't want that.
But that gives you an idea of like, this is how good the Custodes are at fighting. And in the lore also, like, some of the Custodes are tasked with ways to like, okay, so if you were going to kill the Emperor, how would you do it? And then they go through like full war games and planning to like, all right, let's see if I can do this, because they have to plan for every eventuality.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're just an absolutely terrifying force. And since the return of Rabuta Gilliman and the Great Rift opening, they basically decided to take a much more active role in maintaining the Empire and kind of enforcing the Emperor's will when there are threats that need the kind of treatment that no one else has the ability to deal with. So that's
they
why
might actually like going out, because I mean, being a bodyguard for a guy who's just sitting on a throne is kind of boring.
Yeah. Well, and that guy sitting on the throne has got to eat, which is why they also have connected to the Adeptus Custodes, the Sisters of Silence. These are a society of all-female psychic blanks who also don't speak. They only communicate through body language and sign language. And they are also used as anti-psyker forces. In fact, they, after the internment of the Emperor into the Golden Throne, they switched from being just his own personal anti-psyker forces to being tasked with filling the black ships that are loaded up with psychers from around the Imperium so that the Emperor can be fed the essence of 1,000 psychers a day to stay alive. Because, again, the Imperium is a terrible place.
So they're the Emperor's DoorDash.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, the Sisters of Silence are not genetically super modified. They are, I mean, they're probably at peak human condition, but they are not genetically modified super soldiers. They are human bodies. They're human women. But if you do happen to be a genetically modified super soldier, your army rule is martial kata or kata, because we're talking like martial arts kata. And basically, they have stances. When they're selected to fight, whenever a unit is selected to fight, that unit can choose either to have sustained hits 1 or lethal hits in melee. More, it's like, are you fighting against a mob or are you fighting against a single thing?
Okay, can I say my silly thing here?
Say your silly thing.
The Orion, their flyer, and the Land Raider also have martial kata. So they too know the martial arts.
Yeah, it's quite silly.
I mean, it makes sense. You would train your Land Raider to be able to do gun fu, I guess. I don't know.
But for the things that aren't tanks and flyers, which again, that is quite silly, you do have to consider that Custodes are like tough 6. They have 2-up armor. Their weapons are all like AP2, what's usually strength 6 or so.
Yeah,
and
a lot of it's strength 4.
Well, like the bolters are like strength 4, but like the melee weapons.
Oh, yeah, melee will be 6 to 8, yeah.
Yeah. And usually doing 2-3 damage. I mean, you do not want to end up on the assault side. Like the only thing you'll have going for you is the fact, again, that they have small unit sizes. But even like a standard custodian guard is 5 with a Cardian Spear, 5 attacks, weapon skill 2, 7 strength, 2 AP, 2 damage, and then they can have sustained hits 1 or lethal hits on top of that. Yeah.
They're really strong, which is why I think in the past we've suggested Custodes could be a good army for new players because they're very forgiving and there's also not that many models on the board.
No. Yeah.
The downside is there's not that many models on the board, so anytime you lose one, there goes a good chunk of your army.
Right. Yeah, that is the downside of Custodes is that you will feel every model you lose. But those models will get work done before they fall. Like they will absolutely tear into things. And you do have access to things like really decent jet bikes. You've got their Terminators, which are even nastier than the regular Custodes. And the regular Custodes are practically Terminators themselves. Anything else that would be 6 toughness, 2-up, 4-up save, and 3 wounds, that's a Terminator or better. As far as most like most Space Marine armies would be considered, their Terminators are tough 7, 4 wounds, so even more to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
As far as their detachments, the ways they play, they've got their first detachment, their kind of generalist mixed forces detachment. This is the Talons of the Emperor, and this represents the Custodes and the Sisters of Silence working together. And so in this detachment, you have Sisters of Silence providing a 6-inch aura of Feel No Pain 5-up versus Psychic and Mortal Wounds to Custodes units. And likewise, Custodes end up offering a 6-inch aura to the Sisters to give them +1 to hit. So basically, you want your 2 units kind of hugging each other and backing each other up. I would say the downside on this one is Sisters of Silence are far squishier than Custodes. So they will probably be targeted first.
I mean, the only plus is there is a stratagem in there that lets you redirect an attack to the Custodes, but you can only do that once, and then they could attack a different Sisters of Silence or that same one. Yeah, that's the flaws. The Sisters of Silence are so squishy with their 3-up armor and 1 wound that, they're the vulnerability.
Right.
Yep.
And like on top of that, they're 3 toughness. I mean, they are just human bodies, and 3 is like the baseline human toughness in this game. So that's where things kind of fall apart for them a little bit. But as far as like if you have a force of Custodes and Sisters of Silence, you want to run it all together, the Talons of the Emperor is not a bad way to do it, but it's definitely not what most people think of when they think a Custodes army. I would say what most people would think about would be the next detachment, which is the Shield Host. And the shield host is like all custodes all the time. Like that is all it is focused on. And basically at the start of the battle round in that detachment, you choose one of the following, and it lasts for the entire round. Either all your custodes with martial kata crit on 5s in melee, or all your adeptus custodes with martial kata, all their melee weapons improve their AP by 1. So which makes them almost all AP 3, which is almost guaranteed to get through armor. Neither of those is bad, and in fact, this is better because I believe when they first released this book, that was a once per game. For one battle round, you get to do one of these two things, and they changed it to, no, every round you can do one of these two things. Alternately, if you want to go all in on Sisters of Silence, there's the Null Maiden Vigil, which basically says enemy psychers or any unit below starting strength, enemy units, that are within 12 inches of a unit of Sisters of Silence, or I should say Anathema Psychana, which is their keyword, must take a battle shock test, and if they're below half strength, they take it at -1. And then on top of that, the Bolter Sisters of Silence, called Prosecutors, are your battle line units, so you can actually fill out a force. I don't think too many people are running this.
It's still too hard to really fill out a whole army, and even then, their main thing is fighting against psychers, and the psychers are actually kind of rare on the battlefield. Some armies might have a lot, Thousand Sons, Grey Knights, but past that, it'll be certain character units that you won't be around. At least this also allows you to do it below half strength, but you got to get them there. And like you said before, with these only being humans, they're 3 toughness, 3 up armor, which is good armor, but they've only got 1 wound. You're dying to just gunfire or in melee pretty easily just due to the low toughness.
Right. And if you're leaning in on Sisters, that is less stuff that you have in other aspects. And one thing that the Custodes, as strong as they are in melee, outside of bringing in some of those like Caladius tanks and things from the Horus Heresy, they don't have a lot of solid like anti-vehicle firepower. They can probably deal with monsters okay if you've got Custodes, but the Sisters of Silence just do not have the weaponry to deal with a lot of different kinds of threats.
Yeah, highly specialized.
Yeah. Then, if you want to focus on big damn heroes, we have the Arc Champions, which is a character-focused detachment. And here they have, what I've referred to in the past as an Oath of Moment style ability, where you pick one enemy unit in your command phase or at the beginning of the battle round. And for the next battle round, all your Custodes character units, which also includes any units that characters are attached to, they get +1 to wound that selected unit, which would help you take down something that is stronger than, that's tougher than tough 7 more easily. And a lot of the stratagems there all just key off of characters and keeping characters alive and letting characters do cool character things.
I mean, I do really like this detachment because it's kind of keys off of what they're known for, being strong, individualistic characters.
Yeah.
Sort of like we talked about with the Space Wolves, where they focus on your deeds, your sagas, you build a name for yourself. Custodes do the same, and this detachment's kind of like the epitome of that.
Right. Then we've got the Solar Spearhead, which is their vehicle detachment. And again, this is one where you would probably want to splash into some of that Forge World goodness, because otherwise, if you're just looking at the Codex, you have their plain old, just like Contemptor Dread with just the Melt-A-Gun or the Assault Cannon. But if you splash into the Forge World options, you get Caladius tanks, you get those special Contemptor, the Achilles and the Galatus, you get access to the Telemon, which is an even bigger dreadnought. And you definitely want that because your vehicles get really cool, especially your walkers. All your vehicles that are at starting strength get +2 objective control. If you're below starting strength, you reroll hits of 1. And remember, you hit on 2s in most cases, so you're practically always hitting. If you're below half strength, you reroll hits and wounds of 1. Also, your walkers get +2 movement and +1 to advance and charge rolls. And considering your walkers are mostly melee focused, that's awesome. And 2 of your walkers get to become characters, which gives them access to enhancements. And lets one of them be your warlord, if you want.
Yeah, I've used this detachment once, and it was a ton of fun having my dreadnoughts kind of just walk around the board as characters. It was, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
I don't know
lot
if
of
it's
fun.
the strongest one, but it's fun.
It's fun, and they're, like I said, if you have access to the what were Forge World, and they're now just going to be Plastic Horse Heresy. We don't have a Plastic Telemon yet.
No.
But that, I imagine that might be coming eventually. But yeah, like this can be a very fun one to play. And then their last detachment, the one they got, not this past Grotmas, but the one before that in 2024, the Lions of the Emperor. This is what I called the small unit detachment. And this takes into account a couple of things. One, that you don't have a lot of units, and so your custodies are going to have to cover a lot of ground on their own. Plus, a good number of them have access to Deep Strike, so it's easy to get them in places. But also, some of your units, with help of a stratagem here, especially your Terminators, can split up into a whole bunch of separate units. Like if you have a unit of 3 Alaris Terminators, they can become 3 units of 1 Terminator each, which is something they used to do back in an older edition, and they brought it back with a stratagem here. But the reason like being spread out is important here is your non-vehicles get +1 to hit and +1 to wound, and again, you're generally hitting on 2s anyway, but this will help overcome any penalties if they are not within 6 inches of any other friendly units. So the more spread out you are, the more capable your individual custodies get.
I like this, but downside is, the positive is you guide you to board control. You're trying to have all your units kind of spread out and take control of different parts of the board. Downside is a lot of your infantry custodes are not that fast. They're only like 5 to 6 inches, which you're going to say, well, 6 inches is normal. I'm like, yeah, but if you've spread out to where nothing's within 6 inches, it's going to take you a 1 to 2 turns to kind of fill that gap. So once again, they're tough, but as soon as you lose one, you're going to feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is true for this entire army. So, but this one even more so. Actually, no, this one may have been, oh no, this one wasn't a Grotmus detachment. This one was like a balanced stage slate detachment. The Solar Spearhead, the vehicle one, was the Grotmus detachment. But anyway, yeah, you don't have a lot of units to choose from. You don't have a lot of detachments to choose from. You've got a couple that are definitely, I would say, bigger winners than others as far as playing Custodes. And you are most likely going to want to play Custodes. But if you want to play a super elite army with a low model count, models that paint up really quickly, but also look really decent. I've painted Custodes. I would love to get my hands on the new Custodes battle box for Horse Heresy, just to have an additional Custodes force.
I thought you were going to say an Orion.
No, don't need that. But I mean, that box set is a shield captain, 2 units of Custodes, 1 with shields, 1 with guardian spears, and they're 6-person units with Vexilla, and a Caladius tank and the special contemptor. Like that's probably like nearly 1,000 points, if not 1,000 points.
Yeah,
like
easily.
And that you've got some heavy weaponry on the vehicle. You've got effectively 4 units of Custodes. That would get some work done. Like Custodes are, I haven't played Custodes myself, but I've played against Custodes, and most Custodes players I've played have had a great time, and they can be tough nuts to crack. So yeah, if that's the kind of army you're looking for, especially, and it's a great army to get started because it allows your army to be resilient in a way that might make other armies feel frustrating when you're like pulling a lot of models off the board, where you don't have to pull a lot of models off the board with Custodes because they're also very individually very tough too. So it can be a fun army to play around with. Moving on, we have an army that is certified all female.
Except for the priests.
Except for the priests. But in their lore, they literally have to be all female, and that is the Adeptus Sororitas. The elevator pitch on this one is battle nuns with guns. And this one dates back about 5,000 years to the Age of Apostasy. This was an age where the emperor had been dead, or dead-ish, for several millennia, and the ecclesiarchy, the imperial church, which is something that the emperor would hate existing, but such as it is, had really grown in power. And one man, Goj Van Deer, had become the head of the ecclesiarchy and had decided to carry out a little bit of a coup and take over the Imperium. And with him, he had 6 female bodyguards who were convinced of his holiness and his righteousness. And they basically stopped all threats against him. But then another person arrived on the scene, Sebastian Thor, who was basically a priest who decided, no, this is wrong. This is not what the Imperium is wanting. This man is perverting the true faith of the Imperium, and he needs to be stopped, which was absolutely true. Goj Van Deer was a tyrant. And so you've got Sebastian Thor on one side, Goj Van Deer on the other, and then basically an Imperial Civil War starts up. And this whole time, you've got these 6 women who are his personal bodyguards. He's calling them like the brides of the Emperor. And the Custodes have basically isolated themselves from everything that's going on in the Imperium because they're just focused on guarding the Emperor's body right now. They finally hear what's going on with this Imperial Civil War, and they're like, this needs to stop. A group of Custodes goes to approach these bodyguards and says, we heard about all this going on. We think you should talk to the Emperor. And so the 6 brides get ushered into the Emperor's chamber in front of the Golden Throne. Nobody knows what's said, but when they come out, they are pissed with holy vengeance, and they go to Goj Van Deer, accuse him of heresy, and cut him down. And because Goj Van Deer had built up an army within the ecclesiarchy, a new law was passed once the High Lords of Terror were reestablished, thanks to Sebastian Thor. And the rule was the ecclesiarchy cannot have, quote, men under arms. This is known as the decree passive. They cannot have men under arms.
However, very Witch King of Angmar coded.
Yeah, as I was saying, in my notes, I said, enter Eowyn, I am no man. The 6 bodyguards became church celebrities and saints, and they went off to form several orders of aspirants and adherents to the imperial faith that were only open to women and saw themselves as basically the defenders of the faith because, well, we are not men under arms, we are women. And so these sisterhoods were formed, these orders, and those became the Adeptus Sororitas. And even though the ecclesiarchy is not supposed to have an army, they are the militant arm of the ecclesiarchy. They are also used by one of the arms of the Inquisition, the Ordo Hereticus. We'll talk more about them later in part 2. But these sisters have access to power armor. They are not genetically or surgically modified other than having like a power armor control ports built, added to their body. But other than that, they are just, again, kind of peak human condition sisters in power armor. So they have 3 up saves, but 3 toughness, kind of like Sisters of Silence. They're also big believers in the Holy Trinity, the Bolter, the Flamer, and the Melt-A-Gun. Very different Holy Trinity than you might be thinking of if I'm talking about a church. But they do believe that, first off, the Bolter is holy. It is a holy weapon provided by the Emperor himself. And then Flamers and Meltas, well, that's heat and flame purifies all corruption. They also have access to honest-to-goodness miracles. For some reason, if sisters have enough faith in something, things happen for them. And no one can really explain it. It's
because the Emperor's a god.
Yeah, that's what they believe for sure. The Emperor would probably have things to say about that if he weren't a corpse strapped in a chair. But apparently faith in the Emperor can manifest as miraculous displays of grace and power, even to the point of resurrection. There are a number of living saints in the ecclesiarchy, and some of them, such as Saint Celestine, are known to be able to rise from the dead. And this is even reflected on the tabletop. When she dies, you roll a d6, and on a 2 up, she comes back. And this is not something that is not apparently unique to her. There have been and are other living saints. To reflect this access to miracles, their army rule is acts of faith. And so basically, at the start of the battle round, and whenever one of your sister's units is destroyed, you roll a d6, you keep that value, and you set it aside. This becomes known as a miracle die. And then units with acts of faith, once per phase, each unit can use a miracle die. They can use it on a battle shock test, in which case it replaces one of the 2 dice you would roll. You can use it on an advance roll, a hit roll, a wound roll, a damage roll to determine how much damage you do, a charge roll, or a save roll. Sometimes this can come in absolutely clutch. You absolutely need to make an invulnerable save. You absolutely need to wound with this attack. You need to make that advance. You need to make that charge, or you need to max out the amount of damage you just did with a melt-a-gun. If you have a good miracle die, that can come in clutch. Now, the downside is it is a roll, and sometimes you will roll nothing but 1s and 2s. I'm living proof. I have had that happen. It is the most frustrating thing when you have a pile of useless miracle dice.
I mean, there are some characters that let you use just any miracle dice for an effect as opposed to a roll.
Yeah, there are some, like their current named character leader, Morven Vol, who is the High Abbess. She can just spend a miracle die to get extra attacks on her melee weapon or on her special heavy bolter on her Paragon Warsuit. And if she kills a unit, she gets a new miracle die, which is really nice. And it's one of the many reasons why she is one of the most powerful units in that army. And yeah, there are other characters, there are other enhancements and stratagems that will let you combine miracle dice, change the value, treat it as a 6. Like, there are ways you can kind of game around that, but you are still beholden to the luck of the dice. I will say, as far as the rules for the Acts of Faith, this is a rule that has changed, I think, in almost every edition of the game that they've had sisters. And like wildly, like it's been very different every time. This one they've kind of settled in on, and it's a good one. Dice fixing is always a neat ability.
Unless you can do it too much.
Yes, and they did have to tone it down a little bit. You used to get miracle dice at the start of every turn, so you'd get one on your turn, one on your opponent's turn. They also, for a little while, made it so, hey, any phase in which one or more sisters units is destroyed, you get a miracle die. They did at least roll that one back to 1 per unit, which does mean that even when your units die, they are providing you something useful. As far as their detachments and how they play, they're kind of generalist detachment, and I also have it listed as a sacrificial detachment, is the Hallowed Martyrs. Because again, remember, you get miracle dice when your units die. In this detachment, if your units are below starting strength, they get +1 to hit. This means they're generally hitting on 2s. And it's very easy to lose one sister from a squad. Because again, they are only tough 3. They are squishy. So it's very easy to get that +1 to hit. If you are below half strength, you get +1 to hit and +1 to wound. This can be a very powerful ability that can suddenly make a unit of Sisters Punch way above their weight class, if you don't mind losing a few models to do it. But otherwise, it's just kind of the general, this is good with anything you could take with Sisters. The next detachment is the Penitent Host, and this is a penitent detachment, and I need to explain what that is. See, the sisters, because they are very, very devoted, can feel like that they have screwed up and failed the Emperor, and the only way to atone is through death through combat. So Sisters of Battle who have failed somewhat will be put into units known as Repentia. They will be stripped of their power armor. They will be given a large chainsword called an Eviscerator. They'll be whipped into a frenzy by sisters who are specifically tasked with such a job, and they will be basically launched at the enemy to die in close combat. In addition, you also have sisters who have really screwed up and thus are strapped into mortifier engines, which are basically giant robot bodies with guns and flails. Or you also have just criminals who are given the task of death, like of atonement through death. So they might be attached to penitent engines, which is the same thing as a mortifier engine, only with buzzsaws and flamers. And then you've got arcoflagellants who are people who have basically been mind wiped into psycho servitors who are just rushed into combat to die fighting. Cheerful people, great organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is par for the Empire. Remember, the Imperium of Man, terrible place to live. However, for the penitent detachment, for the penitent host, at the start of the battle round, you may choose one of the following vows. You do not have to choose one. That was a change they made. So if you find the book version, like if you get a copy of the book, it will say you have to pick one. That is not true anymore. And you can use each of these vows only once. So your 3 vows either give you plus 3 inches of movement for all your penitent units, plus 1 attack and strength on the charge for penitents, or a 2-up fight on death for penitents. So it's 1 is to kind of get you into position, 1 is to make you better on the charge, and 1 is to keep you fighting if you either get charged first or get stuck in. One of the downsides is there aren't really that many characters that can join penitent units. They do give you an enhancement that allows 1 non-penitent unit to join a penitent unit. It can be a little bit hard to build around. It was one of their more recent holiday bundles from like a couple of years ago. It is a hard detachment to build around. It can be fun. I think you were playing it, Dennis, when you played Sisters Last in a narrative event.
Yes, I did it at the LVO narrative last year. It was a lot of fun, but you are correct. There's so few units you can have with that. You do have to put in like vehicle support to handle bigger things. And you're also very limited on characters because you can have them there, but only 1 could even join a unit. So if you go full penitent, you have some major limitations.
Yeah. Moving on, we have what was once the undisputed champ for most powerful detachment in this book, and it got beaten into submission, sadly. And that is the Bringers of Flame. This is their transport and short range attachment. Now, if you go back a couple episodes to Faction Focus Space Marines, we talked about the Firestorm detachment, which was their transport detachment, which is kind of keyed off the Salamanders. And it was the idea that like all your ranged weapons get assault, and everything within 12 inches gets +1 strength to represent like flamer and melta weapons, because that's what the Salamanders are known for. This was basically that. All your ranged weapons get assault, all your weapons get +1 strength if they're within 6 inches. It used to be 12 in the Codex. They changed it to 6, which was quite the nerf. It's a lot of fun to play. That was my detachment of choice, and a lot of people's, because it was very good, because it also gave you a way to use flamers to do devastating wounds, and you have access to a lot of flamer in this army. So yeah, this one was really, really good. They have toned it down considerably to the point that I don't think anybody is really playing it anymore, unfortunately. But it is a fun play style. For the last one from the Codex, there's the Army of Faith, and this is a combination of an Axe of Faith detachment and a Jump Pack detachment. So the detachment rule is very simple. Instead of doing 1 act of faith per phase per unit, you can do 2, which does mean you burn through miracle dice faster, but you have the option. Now, the reason it's jump pack focused is because you do have a number of jump units in this army, especially once they added a canonist with a jump pack, which was a big improvement for this army. But also, a lot of your stratagems will either target a non-jump unit, or you can target a jump unit, and that jump unit will gain a 3-inch aura of giving the same ability if you had just targeted 1 unit. It's kind of weird because 3 inches isn't a lot of range, and a lot of your jump units, especially if you deep strike them in, may end up being kind of separated from your other units. But it's interesting. I don't know. I don't have enough jump units to really make it worthwhile, and with having fewer miracle dice, this one is really, really hurt by that. It's kind of hard to utilize the army or like the detachment rule when you just don't have enough dice to use twice per turn per unit. Well,
and Rob, you know me, I am all in on the Jump Sisters. I love
you definitely are.
I don't like this detachment. I have not used it. Because like you said, I normally have my things spread out. I don't have them clumped together in like pairs of units, which is what you need for this to really be useful. And if you even tried to pair with an infantry, your jump units move so much further than the infantry. So even now, I still think this is a what were they thinking detachment. Mm-hmm. I would have preferred to either have like a miracle detachment, have these two ideas separated, like one be for the miracles and one be for just something new for the jump packs, because the jump pack units are really cool and you can easily field a whole army with them. Yeah. I mean, they'd still need some anti-vehicle support, but they've got the movement and mobility. And like you said, between Celestine and the new jump, well, not new anymore, but the jump canonists, they've got leaders for their units as well. So yeah, I just wanted a detachment that focused more on that than I'm an aura of miracle dice, or not. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's a weird mishmash, and it doesn't really deal with either side well. And then finally, when we get out beyond the Codex, we get our last Grotmus detachment for them, and that is the Champions of Faith. And this one I have labeled as a righteous detachment because that's what it's about. It creates a new keyword or status called righteous. And basically at the start of each battle round, you select 3 units to gain the righteous status. Righteous units get +1 inch of movement, +1 leadership. Also, if they happen to be either Battle Sisters, which is your battle line unit in this army, Celestian Sacrosancts, which are primarily a bodyguard unit. They are armed with like melee weapons, pistols, and shields, and they are good at protecting characters. Or Paragon Warsuits, which are one of the best units in the game if you've got Morven Vol attached to them, but they're decent without her. If it's one of those 3 kinds of units, they get +1 to hit and +1 to wound if they are one of your righteous choices. In addition, Celestian Sacrosancts just get +1 objective control, so they become even better at holding objectives. So if you want a brick of 10 with a character attached holding down an objective, you can get a lot of work done. In fact, Champions of Faith were kind of the detachment to go with competitively recently for Sisters, because Celestian Sacrosancts with extra OC, and depending on what, like, especially if you have a Hospitaller attached to them, so you can just keep bringing back models, very hard to crack through, especially in units of 10. So potentially unfun to play against, and you are kind of limited on what units you're likely to take, but Sacrosancts, Paragon Warsuits are a couple of your better units anyway, and Battle Sisters are generally useful. They have sticky objectives and things like that, and getting extra movement, extra leader, like the leadership's fine, but the extra movement and the bonuses to hit and wound can help you do a lot with that detachment. So if you want to play a faith-based army that can focus on pulling off deeds that should not be possible, or maximizing your abilities at just like key moments when they need to happen, or you want to play an all-female army of nuns with guns and flame, Adeptus Sororitas is a good army. It's one I've been playing for several years now. I do feel like it's a tough army for them to balance, because if they get the points too low, it's one of those armies that, because of dice fixing, they can get very oppressive. But if they raise the points too high, which is kind of where I think they are right now, you just don't have enough options to really make the army click on the battlefield. So it's a little bit hard to play right now, but it is an interesting army to play for sure. Before the break, we have one more Adeptus army. We've had Adeptus Custodes, Adepta Sororitas, and now we get the Adeptus Mechanicus, which, again, elevator pitch version, hyper-religious techno-fetishists.
Techno-fascists too. That's fine.
Well, that too, yeah. So the Adeptus Mechanicus actually predates the formation of the Imperium of Man, because after humanity spread out to the stars, and even within the solar system, the Adeptus Mechanicus chose Mars, and they made Mars theirs, separate from the rest of humanity. And they also spread out and colonized other worlds and turned them into forges and like factory planets. They are effectively an empire within an empire, because when the emperor started unifying just the solar system, he approached the cult Mechanicus, the Mechanicum, and invited them to join. He did not conquer Mars. He invited them to join. Luckily for him, they did perceive him as a god, but not the kind that everyone else does. They see him as the Omnissiah, the god of technology. And the reason this is important to the Mechanicus is the Mechanicus believes that technology is holy, that the things that mankind has crafted are holy creations in and of themselves, that the knowledge of the human race, the technological knowledge, are special relics to be protected and revered, and that they are perfection. And they saw the Emperor as kind of an avatar of this. So they chose to join him. And it's one of the few cases where he was like, yeah, you have your religion. Go ahead. That's fine. I'm not going to stop you. Now, there is some weirdness here. There are hints that there may be an actual Omnissiah buried under the surface of Mars. It may be one or more shards of the Satan Void Dragon. As in, like, the Necron Satan Void Dragon.
This is fine. This is fine.
Nothing bad can come of this. You know, he's the one, the Catan star god most associated with technology. So, yeah, nothing bad could come of this, if that is true. Like, it's one of these things where hints have been dropped off and on during the years. But again, 40K lore is fluid and prone to retroactive continuity. So it may be, it may not be. The Mechanicus themselves feel that flesh is weak, kind of like the Iron Hands, but rather than having come to that through the trauma of having lost their Primarch, the Mechanicus just believes technology is so cool that we should be more like technology. And so over time, they will replace all their parts as much as possible until there's very little organic matter left of any particular member of the Mechanicus. They're also known for having the most servitors, which are humans who have effectively been mind wiped, enhanced with technology, and programmed to be very crude biotechnical robots. They believe that, as I said, all technical development that needs to have been done has been done, that there is nothing else to be developed, only knowledge that has been lost through the dark age of technology and needs to be regained. There is some truth to this, in that there's a lot more advanced technology that has been lost, such as all the stuff that the Leagues of Votann have access to. Because remember, they are genetically modified abhumans that left Earth millennia ago and didn't ever lose their technology, whereas most of baseline humanity did, which is why the Mechanicus are constantly on the search for a thing called a standard template construct. Standard template constructs are basically blueprints of technology that are developed in such a way that they're easily analyzable and implementable. It is very easy to create technology from standard template constructs. When humanity first went out, they developed all these constructs and they gave them to the various colonization fleets. Over the millennia, a lot of them have been lost, but some of them have been rediscovered, which is why we have things like, for Space Marines, the Land Speeder and the Land Raider, which are not named such because they travel over land. They were named such because they were rediscovered by a tech priest named Arkan Land.
Yep.
But because all technology has already been created and just needs to be rediscovered, technological development is heresy. Do not attempt to craft anything new. Do not attempt to improve on these plans. They have already been improved upon all they can be. They've already been discovered and made, or they've already been created. You just didn't find anything. Which is also why alien technology and integrating alien technology is seen as one of the highest sins in the Adeptus Mechanicus. This does not stop them. A lot of times, tech priests who actually have inquisitive, creative minds will develop new things or mash things together, and then just like, yeah, I found this. I didn't invent it. I totally found this.
Just lying around in the junk drawer.
Yeah, just right. Yeah.
Where'd you get this? The internet.
Oh, well, that's fine then. And And the thing is, tech priests are also the leaders, and there's various ranks of tech priests in the tech church hierarchy, but they are the ones in charge of the Mechanicus. And in fact, they often don't speak in high or low Gothic. They speak in, which is English or Latin or variations of them. Although it's been basically said that what we read as high or low Gothic is just how would this translate to English so that we can understand it. The language that people actually speak in the Imperium is probably completely unrecognizable. But tech priests don't even use that. They use a language called Binharic, which is basically like hyperbinary. And they will send code and communication in these like bursts of Binharic that sound like static to anyone else. I think of the sound that the Death Troopers make in like Rogue One, where it's just like like that kind of sound, and no, you can't understand what they're saying, but that's how tech priests communicate with their other members of the Mechanicus. It's also how they send orders, to the point where a lot of the forces of the Mechanicus have had their brains kind of rewired to just automatically interpret and follow those orders as given. So it's not exactly a hive mind, but kind of. It's weird. Also, what else is weird is the high-tech weaponry and equipment that the Mechanicus has that they don't give to anybody else, because they save the coolest things for themselves. Because they're the only ones who know how to properly, apply oils and unguents and burn the right incense to, start the computer. It's like, this is the ultimate, like, technology cargo cult. Like, some of them kind of understand how this stuff works, but for the most part, they believe in machine spirits rather than computers. Things like that. Everything has a spirit that has to be placated.
As someone who 3D prints, understandable.
You get it?
Yep, I totally get it.
All right.
Yep, the machine works because you believe today. Cool.
Right.
Makes as much sense as anything else.
Yeah. So this is thematically, you're going to see a lot of like weird bionics, a lot of cloaks and robes and weird hats on the leaders. Like some of the tech priests have really weird designs. Like the main named character, Belisarius Cawl, does not even appear human anymore. Like he's so detached from humanity at this point. There's some really good books about Belisarius Cawl, and he's somebody like he's high ranking in the Mechanicus, but he's also somebody who does do the he doesn't even do the I just rediscovered this. I don't know what you're talking about. He'll just straight up say, yeah, I invented this. What are you going to do about it? Their army rule kind of gets more into that tech priests sending orders directly to underlings, and that is the Doctrina Imperatives rule. So at the start of each battle round, you decide on a mode for your army to be in, based on what the tech priests of Mars have decided you need to be doing. That is either Protector or Conqueror imperative. If you selected Protector, all your ranged weapons gain heavy, so if you stand still, you're better at hitting. You also gain +1 ballistic skill, and all your battle line units or units that are within 6 inches of a battle line unit are -1 to be hit, which basically guard objectives. This is the guard objective mode. If you're in Conqueror mode, all your ranged weapons get assault, you get +1 weapon skill on all your melee weapons, and your battle line or units within 6 inches of battle line units get +1 AP. So that's the take objectives. The other one is hold object, but done in a very different way than the Leagues of Votann do it. Your detachments, I don't think they really have a generalist detachment. The Mechanicus is a very weird army with very weird units that only kind of mesh together in weird, interesting ways. Their first detachment, and this one has been reworked several times. You will not find a book, I think, that has more errata than the Adeptus Mechanicus book for 10th edition. It was one of the first ones released, and it was terrible.
Well, and at least they're one army now.
Yeah, they are one army. When they were first released, there were 2 separate armies. There was the Cult Mechanicus, which was all your tech priests and electro priests and robot data smiths. And then you had the Sigatari, which were the military force, the actual foot soldiers and war machines of the Mechanicus. And you could eventually run the two of them together in a weird way, but that was back in like 6th or 7th edition, and since then they have been consolidated into a single army, although sometimes they do not have rules that are mutual between everything. But in this case, like, most of them have the Doctrina rules. But yeah, this first detachment is called the Rad Zone Corps. I really can't call this anything other than the nuclear detachment. Part of their fighting style is they will literally just nuke whatever they're going to go into and just walk through and survive where everyone else around them is dying of radiation. Partially because they've replaced so much of themselves with machinery that tumors really aren't a thing they have to worry about. So to represent this is really a weird detachment. On the beginning of the first round, you roll for each enemy unit in the enemy deployment zone. And then your opponent chooses one of two things before you roll for each unit. They can either choose this unit will take D3 mortal wounds on a 3-up, or they'll take D3 mortal wounds on a 5-up, but they'll also automatically be battle shocked round 1. It's kind of weird because they'll also, like, the battle shock's not going to have much effect if it's on turn, if they go first, because they'll unbattle shock at the end of their command phase. So it's kind of weird still. And then rounds 2 through 5, you roll for every enemy unit that's still in their deployment zone. And on a 3-up, they take a mortal wound and must take a battle shock test. So it's got kind of an interesting lingering idea. The idea of, like, hey, we've just nuked this area and there's so much radiation here that enemy units that stay in their home zone are going to slowly fall apart. Where this whole thing kind of does fall apart is, one, yeah, it's really not much of a downside for your opponent to choose to be battle shocked on round 1. And that also means they're far less likely to take any damage. And the other thing is, your enemy is going to want to get out of their deployment zone, and at that point, your abilities stop working. It's still not a great detachment, but it's better than it was, but still not fantastic. On the other hand, you've got the Skitarii Hunter Cohort, which is the Skitarii detachment, which is focused on your Skitarii infantry, your Skitarii mounted units, and Iron Strider Ballistari, which are a variant of Skitarii. Like, they're very similar to Skitarii, which you've got Skitarii Vanguard, which are like, they're more armored foot soldiers, Skitarii Rangers, which are more like scouty sniper units. They've got mounted units on cavalry. They also have like jump infantry, Skitarii, like infantry. So like, they've got a fair number of options there. And basically everything in that army that is Skitarii infantry, mounted, or Iron Strider Ballistari gets stealth. And then your Sicarians, which are a subset that are almost purely infiltration and melee focused, get cover if they're outside of 12, if they're being shot at from outside 12 inches. So they're already going to be -1 to be hit. They're also going to have better saves if somebody's more than 12 inches away. This one, like, gets kind of hoardy. The way that Mechanicus has been pointed lately encourages people to run big blobs of Skitarii infantry and like mounted units on the board. It's done okay competitively. If you don't necessarily get a lot of the weirder stuff in the Mechanicus army, but it's a perfectly valid way to play, if very expensive cash-wise, because it's a lot of models. On the other hand, instead of Skitarii, there is the Data Psalm Conclave, which is the Cult Mechanicus detachment. This is going to be your tech priests and electro priests. Basically anybody who's not a foot soldier, not more military, and is more just like deep into the tech religious fetishism. Every battle round, you choose a benediction for your Cult Mechanicus unit. So like, if you have Skitarii, things like that, this will not affect them. Either your ranged weapons get +1 AP when you're within half range, or you get +1 strength and attack in the fight phase after charging. Tech priests generally have a pretty good mix of weaponry, so they're good at a little bit of everything. And again, if they join a unit, it becomes a Cult Mechanicus unit, so a lot of these units can attach. Again, this is a very weird army, and trying to replicate its weirdness on the table is interesting. I'll just say that. So Cult Mechanicus is, your tech priests, your electro priests, and your cataphrons, which are basically servitor bodies on tank treads. So that does give you, those will be good with the ranged attack options. Moving on, we've got the Explorer Maniple. This is an objective detachment. The idea is this is the force that is going out and trying to hunt down that lost technology. So in each of your command phases, you choose an objective to be your acquisition marker. This is the thing you want to have. If you are within range of your acquisition marker, or if an enemy unit is within range of that acquisition marker, you reroll ones to wound. It's like a less good version of the Guardian Warhost from Eldari, which kind of did the same thing, except this one, you're limited to one objective. So you better want that one really bad. Then we've got the Cohort Cybernetica. This is your vehicle and robot detachment. One of the units in this army is the Castellan robots. One of the few actual, somewhat autonomous, non-biological in any way robots in the Imperium, because abominable intelligences, as they refer to like self-aware robots, are not allowed in the Imperium. The Imperium is against AI. It's one of the few good things I think they've done. But you do have Cybernetica datasmiths who accompany groups of Castellan robots, and they all have the Legio Cybernetica keyword. And in this detachment, you add 2 to the move characteristic of models in Legio Cybernetica units and +1 objective control. Now, again, your only options there are the Cybernetica Datasmith and the Castellan robots, although Castellan robots are tough 9, 2-up, 5-up saves, 7 wounds, and OC2 that come in units of 2 to 4 and are bristling with gun. Nothing amazingly strong unless they get into melee, and then they can ruin your day if they have a Castellan fist. And if they have gun hands, it's not quite as good, but if for punching, but everything else is pretty nasty. But then also a lot of your stratagems here are about vehicles, which the Castellan robots are walker vehicles, but all your vehicles are affected by like most of these stratagems. So this is the detachment if you want to lean into the heavier stuff in this army. And then finally, the Grotmus detachment they added a couple of years back, the Halo Screened Battle Clade. So this is a buff detachment. In your command phase every battle round, you select 1, 2, or 3 units based on game size. So at 2,000 points, you pick 2 units to get the Halo Override keyword. And then you select a buff for units with the Halo Override keyword, either +2 movement, +1 toughness, the ability to advance and charge, or stealth. And then there are other strats and things that affect Halo Override unit. This was probably the most well-rounded because it's good with everything, but not stupid like the Rad Zone Corps is. Like, yeah, if there was a detachment I was going to play, it would probably be this one. Mechanicus is one of the few armies I have not played. I have played against it a few times, but it has changed so much every iteration just because of like what units are available and how they work, how things like the benedictions and the doctrine imperatives have worked. It's never been the same twice. So it is a tricky army to play. The models are very fiddly and spindly because those bionics are not chunky, other than like the Cataphrons. The Cataphrons and the Castellans are pretty chunky, but most of the infantry is spindly. Tech priests can be a nightmare to paint because you have all these spindly, weird bionicle bits under, like, peeking out from robes. It's just a very unusual. It's got a very distinct look on the tabletop, though. Like, there's nothing that looks like a Mechanicus army.
It's nice because they are a relatively new army. Like, they've always been in the background, but only in the last decade, I think, have they started getting models. So they've, they're kind of like where like Leagues of Votann are right now. Like, that's where like they, where Leagues of Votann will be in like a decade is like where they're at now, where it's like, okay, they finally have enough stuff out there, but it's all newer stuff. It's all plastic. The models look great, and they spit in the face of physics, like all the modern
very
GW
much
models
so.
do.
Yeah. And definitely probably the weirdest looking army that we're going to talk about, because like Custodes, big chunky soldiers in golden armor. Adeptus Sororitas, women in power armor. Some of the other armies we're going to talk about are just like normal dudes with guns, or slightly like more specialized space marines, or giant robots that we've already talked about a version of giant robots before. This one is just like, nope, there's nothing like this. This, like, the Mechanicus are almost an alien army inside the Imperium. They're so weird. Also, often, if not the antagonists of a lot of like Black Library novels, they often don't help because they're also all zealots. Like a lot of novels, if there's a Mechanicus character, they're gonna do something stupid because technology is available. Something bad will happen. It's very common. We've got 4 more factions to talk about, but we're going to get into those after a sponsor break. But if you want to help support the show, there's 3 great ways you can do that. First is our Patreon. We are patreon.com/preferred enemies. And that gives you access to a number of things. First off, it gives you access to a ad-free version of the show. If you don't like the ads that are run at the beginning, middle, and end of the show, and you just want to get the content itself, if you join our Patreon, you get access to that. You also get access to our Discord, which is a wonderful community of people that we love hanging out and chatting with and sharing hobby stuff with. It also will get you access to any material we create specific for our patrons, such as our 10th edition rework of the Urban Conquest campaign box from 8th edition. But all that's available on the Discord. And again, you get access to an ad-free version of the show. And
I was also told to plug the Discord as a place to come and personally bully me. So
yes. If you want to bully Kevin, he's often available and is easy to push around. It's great. Yeah, we love you, Kevin. Thank you for being there to be the punching bag for the Discord. But yeah, if you want to join, we would love to have you there. And it's only $1 a month. It's basically an online tip jar. We don't lock any of our shows behind a paywall. So $1 a month, if enough people come in and add $1 a month, it adds up and it helps support us beyond the ad revenue we get. And allows us to do things like, keep our recording service and our hosting service paid for. All of our patrons have kept this show income neutral for us for a long time and have helped support the show. We would be paying a lot more out of pocket if not for our patrons. You all have really made the show possible all this time, and can't say thank you enough for that. So if you want to join that group of preferred frenemies, we'd love to have you at patreon.com/preferred enemies. Second is our YouTube channel. We are at youtube.com/@preferred enemies. And these are basically video versions of our audio podcasts. They come out generally about a week after each podcast. And just do the normal YouTube thing there. Like, subscribe, comment, help us fight the algorithm and get the show in front of more people. And then third is Preferred Enemies merch. You can find us at preferredenemies.com/merch. And we've got t-shirts, hats, mugs, stickers, all with the Preferred Enemies logo. And we're going to look to add more merch in the future as we can get some more designs put together. We would love to see the Preferred Enemies show like repped in public and see it on hats and shirts. That would be very cool. So those are 3 ways you can support the show. But also, as I said, we have sponsors. So we're going to take a break for our sponsors. And when we come back, we've got 4 more factions to go for our last faction focus episode. See you in a bit. And we're back. That means it's time to finish up our faction focus series with the last 4 factions of the Imperium. And we're going to start it off with the most regular dude faction of them all, the Astra Militarum, aka the Imperial Guard. Yes.
Yay. Something none of us play.
Ye old plastic army man soldiers.
Yep. The regular human infantry for the most part. There's a couple of abhumans sprinkled in here and there, but yes, just army soldiers.
Or all the tanks.
Yes.
And or all the tanks.
And occasionally horses too.
Robot horses.
Well, somewhat robot horses. Partially
And regular horses. Yeah.
And regular.
Yeah.
So, basically, the Imperium is the whole galaxy. And there's not nearly enough Space Marines to cover the entire galaxy. There's definitely not enough Custodes. There's probably not enough sisters or Mechanicus. Plus, the sisters and the Mechanicus kind of focus on their own things. They're more religious oriented or technologically oriented, or in the case of Mechanicus, it's really both. So they've got their own things they're focusing on. But when you need the Imperium defended or you need a planet retaken, yeah, you may have some Space Marines available, but most likely you're going to just be using classic human wave tactics. Throw millions of people at the problem and try to make it go away. And that is basically the Astra Militarum.
Hope that the enemy aliens have a preset kill limit, and then they'll just stop fighting.
Right.
Zat Brannigan would make a great Imperial Commissar.
Oh, absolutely. The Astra Militarum, they are just normal humans. They have been conscripted from across the galaxy. So there's a lot of variations because you'll have worlds that have standard baseline Imperium technology. You will have worlds that are medieval in nature, feral in nature. You have worlds that are poisonous chemical hellholes. You will have worlds where only the nobility gets to serve in the military. It's all over the map. And so you will get a lot of variations in how different guard regiments will look. Sometimes they'll be associated with analogs of certain human cultures. And there have been models and conversion bits for a lot of these in the past. Nowadays, there are 3 major versions you are likely to see. On one hand, well, I guess I'll end up with 3 hands like a weird mutant if I do that. But in one group, you have the Cadians. The Cadians kind of represent, I would think, bog standard Imperial Guard. When you think Imperial Guard, like the Cadians are the epitome of that. Originally based off of the planet Cadia, which was positioned at the entrance to the Eye of Terror, and it was an entire culture that grew up as the idea of we have to defend the Imperium from the forces of chaos that come out of the Eye of Terror. Therefore, we will build a warrior culture that is focused on making the most competent guardsmen in the entire Imperium. And so they would do that by having like the most standardized gear. You would learn to clean and prep a lasgun in like 30 seconds by the time you're 10, that kind of thing. It's like you would just basically become a born soldier. You would be drilled and trained as a soldier from youth. And then you would be sent out to other planets as part of your regiment and bring your Cadian skills and style of leadership and gear and everything to other planets. And so that kind of design would propagate throughout the Empire. So Cadians are kind of, again, the bog standard. You see a guardsman, you're going to think somebody in the Cadian helmet and flak jacket and lasgun. Unfortunately for the Cadians, their planet was destroyed after Abaddon the Despoiler ran a Blackstone fortress into it because it was in the way of his plan to blow the Great Rift wide open. He was successful. Their planet is gone now, or it's at least been reduced to a few large chunks. But as far as the Cadians are concerned, as long as one of them stands, Cadia stands. And so they have not stopped. And in fact, most Cadian soldiers were probably not on Cadia at the time of its destruction. So Cadian regiments are still all over the galaxy, and there's other regiments that have kind of taken on the honorific Cadian style in tribute to Cadia. Second group that you see a lot, and when I say you see a lot, these are also like they have their own model lines. Some of these are very old model lines. Some of them are very new. But you also see them represented in the rules very clearly with distinct unit types. The second one is the Catachans. Catachan jungle fighters are from a planet called Catachan. Catachan is a death world. It is basically, there are death worlds all over the Imperium where the local flora and fauna and environment is actively hostile to human life. We've mentioned Fenris, the home of the Space Wolves, before, as a death world. Catachan is a death world as well. It's all tropical forest, and it wants to kill you. It's basically Australia. And Catachan, they tend to look like a cross between Vietnam fighters and Arnold Schwarzenegger's squad from Predator. I mean, it's Rambo, it's Predator. Like that is the image of Catachan. That's absolutely where they're based off of. They have a character named Sly Marbo. This is not subtle naming here.
Wait, that's based off of Rambo? Oh my god.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Did you not, though? I'm pretty sure you did.
No, I am very dumb and I do not recognize subtlety or satire.
And that's why you play World Eaters. Subtlety, not your forte.
That is fair.
You resemble that remark.
Yes. Angry chainsaw noises.
Yeah. Which is also how the Catachan are a combination of like traps and knife fighting, but also sentinel walkers with chainsaws and flamethrowers. So they're both experts in stealth, but they're also experts at inflicting terrible violence up close. And then the third version that you are likely to see, the third style of guardsmen you're likely to see and that are reflected in the rules, are the Death Corps of Krieg, which are, they're not newish because they've been available in Forge World for a long time, but in the last couple of years, they've been actively converted into plastic and made like a fully viable army. The Krieg are like what would happen if you took every force from World War I, put them into a blender, ground it up, poured it out into a mold of a guardsman, gave it a las rifle, and told it to go. Because they are very dour trench fighters in gear that is a weird mix of different World War I tropes. I know in the past I've made the mistake of comparing them to World War I Germans, and it's a weird mix of World War I German and French and a little bit of British. It's a little bit of everything. But they come from a world that I think started to turn traitor. Like there was a faction that did turn traitor, and they spent a long time on their planet fighting for the Imperium, trying to defeat the traitors, and using a lot of biological, nuclear, and chemical warfare to the point where their planet's effectively ruined, and they consider serving the Imperium kind of their penance. They will fight until death. They will fight in environments that no one else wants to fight in. They are experts at, again, human wave tactics, trench warfare, going over the top. Like they are sci-fi World War I. I mean, that is just absolutely what they are.
Basically, all of the stuff that like we talked about that like the Skitarii and the Admech do with like cutting parts off and replacing it with mechanical stuff, they just do it with more people.
Yeah.
Same exact tactics, just send in more people.
Yeah, gas mask is good enough, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you're probably fine.
Yeah. Beyond these three, there are many, many other styles of regiments you might find in older models or people have done conversion kits. There's the Praetorian Guard, which are all like 1800, like late 1800 red coats, complete with British troops with pith helmets. You've got Talarn Desert Fighters, which are kind of an Arabic-style fighter. You've got the Valhallan Ice Warriors, who are mid-World War II Soviet winter troops. There's the Mordian Iron Guard, who are from a planet where it's always night because the day side will kill you. And they are notoriously stern, experts at drilling, and wear very nice, neat blue uniforms with nice caps and everything. And that's just scratching the surface. There's so many different types of guard armies. It's an army where you can really go kind of nuts and then just say, yeah, these are Cadians. They just don't look like Cadians.
Yeah.
Although most people, like, if you want to play Krieg, you play Krieg because that's what you're there for.
Right.
Beyond that, as Richard mentioned, lots of tanks. There are a lot of standardization in guard tanks because A, the Imperium doesn't like to advance technology, and B, having designs that are easily mass producible is good when you're talking about an army that tends to work via overwhelming numbers. So you've got three major standardized vehicle chassis. You've got the Chimera, which is their troop transport, but also the basis for a lot of like their artillery vehicles are built on Chimera chassis. So you'll see similar lines, similar like front gun equipment, things like that. Then there's also the Leman Russ tank, named after the Primarch of the Space Wolves. And the Leman Russ itself has at least a half dozen different turrets that it can mount, which provide anything from standard battle cannons to massive Gatling guns, plasma cannons, cannons that are focused on punching through enemy armor. Also, the Leman Russ can mount las cannons, melt-a-guns, plasma guns. It's got side sponsons, or you can go with some older marks where they didn't have side sponsons for extra guns. The Leman Russ is kind of ubiquitous and has been around since the Great Crusade, even before, back when the Astra Militarum was literally just the Imperial Army. And then a relatively recent addition, although it's a retcon, it's always been around, quote unquote, is the Rogel Dorn tank, which is a bigger tank that is even more loaded with gun than the Leman Russ. It is noticeably larger and a very formidable battle tank. There's one other chassis that is limited to super heavy tanks, and that is the Baneblade. And the Baneblade is the basis for, again, about a half dozen different builds of super heavy tank that the Astra Militarum can take. And they are practically rolling fortresses. They are just so ridiculously loaded with weaponry. Some even have transport capacity up to like 20 to 40 people inside. Some of them mount guns that can kill Titans. There's some absolutely ridiculous power in the tanks that the Guard can take. In addition, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, they can also make use of abhumans, human-based mutants that kind of breed true and have provided very specific roles in the Guard. There's two of note. The Ogren, which are big, lumbering, pretty dim-witted humanoids, but who are also very loyal and make for very good bodyguards and also kind of like shock trooper meat wall kind of strategy. Like if you just need a trio of big guys to go knock some heads, a squad of Ogren will get the job done. In addition, there are Ratlings, which are basically hobbits or halflings. They're decent scouts. They're even better snipers. So the Guard mostly use Ratlings for their snipers. Not to be confused with Skaven from fantasy. These do not actually look like rats. They just look like hobbits. Like, this makes up pretty much every Guard army, these components. There will be a few other things. They do have access to some cavalry. They do have officers that you can run, including Lord Solar, their kind of named main Imperial Guard leader. There's also Ursula Creed, the continuer of the Creed bloodline from Cadia, who has, much like her father Ursakar Creed, has become a Guard leader in her own right, and various other officers you can mix in. And those officers are important because your army rule for the Astra Militarum is voice of command. And this has been this or a variation of this has been the Guard's mechanic for a long time. And basically the way the Guard works is officers give orders to units. What kind of units they can give orders to and how many orders they can give is based on the commander. So like a tank commander can give orders to vehicles. A infantry commander can give orders to infantry. And they may be able to give like 2 or 3 or maybe only 1 order. But basically they pick a unit of the appropriate type within 6 inches and they can give that unit an order. There are 6 standardized orders and they can provide plus 3 inches of movement, plus 1 weapon skill for melee attacks, plus 1 ballistic skill for ranged attacks, plus 1 attack for rapid fire weapons, plus 1 save to a maximum of 3 up, and plus 1 leadership and objective control. So if you need a unit to hold an objective, if you need a unit to get somewhere, if you need a unit to hit, or if you need a unit to just bury the opponent in firepower, you've got orders that can handle pretty much all of those. That is absolutely key to how the Imperial Guard works. And it really does like let you make certain units better, but you do have to have officers scattered throughout your army to give those orders. As far as your detachments, these basically cover the different styles of fighting that the Guard can do. So starting off, we have a true generalist detachment with the Combined Arms detachment. This one basically says, hey, some units are going to be good at shooting some things. Some units are going to be good at shooting other things. So your regiment units, which are infantry mostly, but I believe this also includes like your cavalry and your artillery, like your field guns and things like that, get lethal hits against anything that's not a monster or vehicle. So if you're fighting, like firing artillery at an infantry squad, all your 6s to hit are lethal. Squadron units, which are vehicles, get lethal hits against monsters and vehicles. So your vehicles are better at killing vehicles. Your infantry is better at killing infantry. And I have seen this detachment do some very terrible things, because we mentioned how tough Custodes are. Suddenly, the standard guardsman with his las rifle, his las gun that only is strength 3, it's going to auto wound on 6s to hit, which suddenly means you're doing a lot more wounds than you should do normally. Things like that. So it can be a very effective detachment, and then you have stratagems that are good for just about anything you take. Then you've got the Siege Regiment. And when we first saw this one, and when we did our Kodos review, this one kind of threw us, because the army rule sounds like an artillery rule, but the detachment is not. The detachment is an infantry detachment. Bear with me, a little bit weird. Each battle round, you choose one of 3 types of artillery support. And the idea is there are big guns somewhere off the battlefield that are lobbing shots over, and they're going to do one of 3 things that battle round. And whatever effect you choose can affect up to 2, 3, or 4 units based on game size. So 2,000 point game, it's going to affect up to 3 units. So those 3 things you can choose are: 1, you roll for every enemy unit that is more than 12 inches away from one of your units. On a 5-up, then that unit is shaken, which means they are -2 to move and -2 to charge rolls. However, once you hit 3 units affected, then you stop rolling. So you kind of want to pick which ones you want the most and hope you roll well. The second option you can pick is you just select however many units based on game size. These are specifically enemy units, and they just automatically gain the scattered trait, which means they can no longer get cover. The idea is like the incoming barrage has left the unit kind of scattered and unfocused, and they don't have the opportunity to take cover cohesively. And then the third option is for smoke. Basically, you select 3 of up, or you select a certain number of your units based on game size. They all gain stealth. And then all of the stratagems in this detachment are about infantry moving forward and taking the fight to the enemy as close as possible. So this is actually your like Death Corps of Krieg going over the top from trenches and charging forward, while artillery lance does like a rolling barrage and disorients the enemy so you can take the fight to them. It's actually a decent detachment from what I understand. It's just, when we first read it, Guard is an army we are working on building up armies for, but we do not play yet. But it is actually supposed to be a pretty effective detachment from what I understand.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. This is probably what I'll be playing once I get once I get my Krieg army built, assuming this is still valid in the next edition.
This is true. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with 11th edition. There's the Mechanized Assault Detachment. This is your pretty standard transport detachment. Models that disembark from a transport, such as your Chimeras, or there's also the Taroks, which is more focused on like elite troops, but it is another transport, or even that Baneblade variant that has transport capacity. Models that disembark from a transport get +1 to wound. Pretty standard, and again, a lot of your stratagems are going to have to do with transport shenanigans. Now, if you want to focus just on vehicles, and especially tanks, there's the Hammer of the Emperor. This is your vehicle detachment. Your squadron units, which, again, most of your vehicles have the squadron keyword, auto advance 6 inches. Like, you don't roll, you just, if they need to advance, they just automatically go 6 inches. And when you advance, you can move through enemy unit engagement range. Like, you can get within an inch of the enemy as you push past them. You just can't stop in engagement range while you advance. Now, this does not give you assault. There is a stratagem that will let you fire after advancing, but that means it only affects 1 unit. But all the other stratagems and enhancements help your vehicles get better at doing what vehicles do. If you want to go tank heavy, this is probably the one you're picking. There's the recon element. This is what I call the sneaky detachment. It's the kind of the stealth detachment. And this is your Catachan Jungle Fighters detachment, although I've seen it also used for Death Corps of Krieg as well. Walkers, which are sentinels, which are kind of like light walkers with a variety of weapons. And regiment units, so infantry, get cover. And just automatically, you always have cover. And if you have cover from something else, you get an extra +1 to your armor save to a maximum of 3 up. Considering most guardsmen have armor saves of 5?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Acadian shock troops is a 5 up. Yeah. So getting that down to a 3 up can make a big difference in survivability. And then this one's also interesting in that your stratagems are all reactive booby traps and mines and things like that. Because the idea is you've moved forward, but you are also trying to screw with the enemy when they come at you. Then you've got your 2 detachments that were released after the Codex. One is our first Grotmus detachment. That is the Bridgehead Strike. This is a Militarum Tempestus detachment. Now, what are the Militarum Tempestus? So various guard regiments have their own more like elite troops. For the Cadians, there's the Kasserkin. And for the Death Corps Krieg, I would say the combat engineers are kind of a little bit more elite. But for all guard, they have special schools that they will send people who they think have real potential. It's basically called the Schola Progenium. And it's also where commissars are trained. Commissars are Astra Militarum morale officers, political officers, who are there to make sure that the guard always moves forward and follows orders. In fact, commissars are known to shoot you in the head if you try to run. Some of the best characters in guard novels are commissars. In fact, Gaunt, Ibram Gaunt from the Gaunt's Ghost series, and Caiaphas Cain from the various Caiaphas Cain books are both Imperial Guard commissars, although in both cases, they rarely like to shoot people in the head, which makes them kind of outliers. But most commissars will not blink at shooting someone in the head. But along with the commissars, there's also special troops that are trained to be elite troops that can be dropped into any situation, often literally grab-shooted out the back of flyers, called the Militarum Tempestus. And Tempestus Scions are the troops, and then there's like the Tempestus leadership as well. But the group is known as the Militarum Tempestus. So they are more elite. They carry better weaponry. They carry hotshot lasguns, which can do some real damage even to like power armor. And so the Bridgehead Strike represents those elite units that can drop in anywhere. So first off, all your infantry units reroll hits of 1. So you're just more accurate overall. Tempestus units get +1 to hit when they are set up either as reinforcements, because again, you have options to either have them come in from the side or deep strike them in, or if they're disembarking from a transport, or they're even more likely to hit when they first get set up. And then in addition, if your warlord is a Tempestus command squad, then your Tempestus become battle line and get +1 objective control. So they become better at holding objectives. This one was also, like, I think when it first dropped was very powerful and has been toned down a little bit. But if you want to do the like hyper elite drop army, this is the detachment for doing that. And then finally, we have our most recent detachment, which was added during one of the balanced data slate passes, and that is the Grizzled Company. And this is an orders detachment. It's very much a generalist detachment, kind of like the Combined Arms, but this one works very differently. First off, all your officers can issue 1 additional order, and any units that you have targeted with orders are +1 to hit, which means even if you take aim or fixed bayonets, which gives you extra ballistic skill or weapon skill respectively, then this gives you +1 to hit, so you'll still be better yet, and you might be hitting on like 2s. Also, if a unit is within range of an objective, they are +1 to wound as well. So you can get a lot of power out of just even basic guardsmen with the Grizzled Company. It's a very effective detachment, and like I said, probably easily as good as the Combined Arms detachment, and gives you stratagems for targeting units that have taken particular orders to make them even better, or even being able to issue an order at the start of any phase. So like, oh, I ran out of all my orders during the command phase. Well, I can issue another order at the beginning of the shooting phase. So like you've got ways to just maximize your order usage in this detachment. So considering that is the Guards mechanic, it's like having a Space Marine detachment that makes Oath of Moment better. it's just very solid for them. So if you want to play just like army men, like if you love the military, if you love different styles of military, if you love the aesthetics of World War II or like jungle fighters, or you want to run like tanks that don't look like sci-fi tanks, you just want straight up tank battles, Astra Militarum is a fantastic faction for that. Just be aware it is an expensive detachment because you're either talking about a lot of infantry or a lot of vehicles. It will add up very quickly, but it is also a super cool army to see on the table. We've got 3 more to go. Next up, I told you we weren't done with Space Marines. Here's that one super secret special Space Marine detachment. And when I say super secret, this officially does not exist. And yet it does. We all know it does. There's army rules and models for it. But these are the Grey Knights. Surprise! Psychic Anti-Demon Space Marines.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. In fact, they so officially don't exist that if you see Grey Knights in action, if you, let's say you are a unlucky Astra Militarum infantryman who is fighting against a demonic incursion and Grey Knights show up and save the day, you're not going to be able to tell anyone because they are either going to mind wipe you so you forget you ever saw them, or they'll just kill you. It's unfortunate.
Sometimes they'll wear you as a hat in battle.
Sometimes they will wear you as a hat. That is a deep cut of lore where some sisters were fighting against demons of corn, and the Grey Knights showed up and said, you know what? We need to cast a spell against the demons of corn, so we're going to kill all the sisters and use their blood to anoint our armor and make us safe. Which seems like a very corn thing to do, which it seems counterproductive, but that is an old bit of lore that people have had issues with for years. Because Games Workshop can sometimes be very edgelordy and try-hard, this is officially the 666th chapter of Space Marines.
Because of course they are.
Because of course they are. They are based on Titan, the moon of Saturn, and the moon Deimos, which in our timeline is currently orbiting Mars, was taken from Mars and put in orbit around Titan to become their custom forge world. Basically, the Mechanicus agreed to give them a little bit of Mars to orbit Titan and be their custom forge world to make all the special Grey Knight gear, because their gear is stepped up a bit from the average Space Marines gears. For one thing, every single Grey Knight is a psyker. They are all psychic. And in fact, most of their weapons are psychically active force weapons. Even their ranged weapons can be loaded with psychic bullets, like quicksilver ammunition and things like that, because they are the experts in dealing with demons. They are also the militant arm of the Ordo Malleus, which is an inquisitorial order, which we will be talking about a bit later. And I would say, while they are technically Space Marines, they go through the same kind of surgeries and genetic modifications that Space Marines do. Effectively, they are far more elite, so they occupy a spot technically between Space Marines and Custodes, partially just by virtue of being psychic, although physically they are no different from, other than being psychic, from standard Space Marines. And in fact, as far as we know, there are no Primaris Grey Knights. They have not received the Primaris treatment. Some of their newer models have kind of Primaris, like they've got a couple of characters, I should say, that have kind of Primaris proportions, just because it's better true scaling. But effectively, in story, we don't think we've had Primaris Grey Knights.
Right. I mean, I'm waiting for like the model refresh and it'll be, you know, that hand wavy. They've just always been they're not Primaris. They've just always been this big, and because they're better.
Right. Yeah. Which I could, totally see them doing. It's just easy retcon. Technically, I don't know if they'll even explain it in the story. They'll probably just do better models, but we'll see.
Because that's what happened to the Castellan Crow.
Right,
model,
yeah, he's just
because they updated that model, and he is definitely like Primaris sized.
Right,
and not a word is said.
Nope.
Well, and we just saw with Custodes that like we're getting new Custodes models that are better proportioned, and it's just we've updated the models. So
yeah. Primaris Space Marines, even though they are a massive thing in the lore, it's kind of a weird outlier compared to how they normally address these kind of things. But yeah, the Grey Knights, they all wear silver power armor engraved with hexagrammatic wards and extra detailing.
Purity seals everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Every single one carries a storm bolter. They don't carry handheld bolters. They have their bolters strapped to their forearm because they need both hands for the Nemesis Force weapons that they wield to use against demons. So every single Grey Knight is both a double threat in melee and ranged ability, but they do also have heavy ranged weapon purgation squads that have special weapons that are unique to them. They field a lot of Terminators. In fact, they can take Terminators as battle line troops. With, they are slower, but also they deep strike, as does almost everything in this army. Almost like all your infantry can deep strike, and that actually comes into play with their army rule, Gate of Infinity, which is a teleportation shenanigans / uppy downy detachment, kind of like the Hypercrypt Legion for Necrons. Based on game size, at the end of your opponent's fight phase, you can put up to 2, 3, or 4, so in a 2,000 point game, it's going to be 3 non-engaged units back into strategic reserves. So you can just assuming they're not in close combat, you can just pull models off the board and then during your movement phase, re-deep strike them back in, or have them come on off the sides if there's nowhere to go to deep strike. So even though this is an army that is mostly on foot, you do have access to rhinos and land raiders, but you don't see them all that often. And you do have Terminators who, yes, they move as slow as Terminators do. You are able to put them where you need them, thanks to Gate of Infinity. As far as your detachments, you do have kind of a generalist detachment called the Brotherhood Strike. And this one works very nicely with that Gate of Infinity and everything having deep strike. When a unit enters via deep strike, it rerolls hits and wounds of 1 for that turn. So deep strike somebody in, you're rerolling 1s, and Grey Knights, think they mostly hit on 3s. They're not quite, like I said, they're not quite Custodes level.
Right. I think the Paladins, hit on 2s.
Yeah, which are basically their elite Terminators. Yeah, they hit on 2s. So you do have some units that will basically always hit if you drop them in. But still, rerolling 1s when you're already hitting on 3s means most of your hits are, most of your attacks are going to hit.
Yeah.
Moving on, you've got the Hallowed Conclave. This is a Terminator-focused detachment. And this one basically says Terminators can fall back and still shoot or charge, which means it's impossible to tie them up. Now, granted, they're not moving very fast, but you do still have access to that Gate of Infinity, so you can keep moving your Terminators around. And you actually have a lot of Terminators available because between the battle line, just Brotherhood Terminators and the Paladin squads, and a lot of your characters are in Terminator armor, you've got plenty of things to work with there. So if you want something that's going to feel a little bit more kind of like a Custodes army where you have a smaller model count and everything is more powerful, that is definitely an option to take there. There's the Banishers, which is a psychic detachment. So this one is focused kind of on the idea that you are using your psychic weapons and your psychic abilities to their utmost. So anytime a Grey Knights unit is selected to fight in melee, they may make a leadership check, which I think is supposed to be kind of reminiscent of doing an old psychic test.
Yeah.
If you pass, then you get to choose for that unit's psychic melee weapons, which is going to be most of your melee weapons will be psychic, to either get sustained hits 1 or lethal hits. So again, depending, kind of like, it's like having martial kata when you fight, you just have to pass a leadership check to do it. If you fail the leadership check, you just don't get anything. There's no downside. There's the Sanctic Spearhead, which is your vehicle detachment. Now, I did mention, well, you've got rhinos and land raiders. Well, what other vehicles do you have? Oh boy, do you have a couple of interesting, do you have at least one interesting option? You do have character dreadnoughts. You've got the Venerable Dreadnought that you can take as a character. But also you have what might be one of the more controversial model designs in 40K, the Nemesis Dreadnought.
You mean ugly?
The baby carrier.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, because if you're new to Grey Knights, The Nemesis Dread Knight was created with the idea of, well, what if you have these like greater demons that are gigantic, but you have Grey Knights who are infantry sized? Well, you need something that will allow them to go toe to toe, swing for swing against a greater demon. And the Nemesis Dread Knight was made. And it's, what if you had a really big dreadnought, but instead of having a corpse inside, you had a person just piloting it? But we didn't want to give it a cockpit, so we just strapped the Grey Knight into the front of it like a baby in a baby Bjorn. And yeah, that's it. It's basically a big exoframe for a Grey Knight. It is a very silly looking vehicle.
Yeah.
But they're also absolute beaters in close combat and can pack some decent guns.
They are often some of the best models in the army, rules wise.
Yes, yeah. So this would be the detachment that you might take more Nemesis Dread Knights. I mean, you're likely to see Nemesis Dread Knights anyway. And yes, like everything else, they can deep strike in. And for what you get on them, they're not horribly expensive. They're like 210 points. There are also character versions, the Grandmaster in Nemesis Dread Knight, which are that but better because it's a character who can do some real damage. But like even the regular Nemesis Dread Knights can advance or fall back and shoot and charge, which is actually kind of nice for this because in the Sanctic Spearhead, your vehicles auto advance 6. And your ranged weapons get assault, which you won't need on the regular Nemesis Dread Knights, but you might want on the Grandmaster Dread Knight, who does not have that advance and shoot ability. And then, yeah, it's got stratagems for your other vehicles as well. There's the Augurium Task Force. This is the last one from the Codex, and this is a teleportation detachment. Now, we've already had a deep strike detachment. What makes this one different? So this one's interesting in that it encourages you to not pick all the units you could pick at the end of your opponent's fight phase. Because if you don't max out your Gate of Infinity choices, then at the start of your movement phase, you can pick a non-engaged unit, just like you would select for Gate of Infinity, and put it into reserves at the start of your movement phase. And so then you can deep strike it that same turn. The flexibility that gives you is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't get the extra bonus to hit for deep striking in, but being able to uppy downy something on the same turn is something that most armies do not have access to. And again, because mobility is not something you're likely to have a lot of in this army, it's not a bad choice to take. Also, it's kind of a second generalist detachment. It just encourages you to be a little bit more selective on how many things you use Gate of Infinity on.
Yeah.
And then finally, we've got the Warpbane Task Force, which is another one of those board control detachments where your deployment zone is your zone of control. Control half the objectives in No Man's Land. That's your zone of control. Control half the objectives in your opponent's deployment zone. That's your zone of control. In the Warpbane Task Force, this actually is really nice for you. First off, all your units reroll hit rolls of 1. But any of your units in your control zone or units of purifiers who are like the elite non-Terminator units in the Grey Knights just reroll all hits. The amount of consistency you can get out of the Warpbane Task Force is impressive. And purifiers are also really good units. This is probably one of the better board control detachments. The only downside to this, and it's the same downside that all board control detachments have, is that if your opponent doesn't have any objectives in their deployment zone, because a lot of missions don't, some missions only have objectives in No Man's Land, you can never board control the whole board. Yeah. You will only be able to board control 2/3 of it. But if you run Purifier heavy in this detachment, that's not necessarily a problem because they don't care. They are always their own zone of control.
Right.
But yeah, Grey Knights, if you want to play something that, again, is more of an elite army that is relatively easy to paint because the army is traditionally silver, a few details here and there, a little bit of red and white, or a little bit of gold. But if you want to do an army that is relatively easy to paint, smaller model count, and doesn't play like any other Space Marine army, Grey Knights are a good choice. That's not the only knights we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about also Imperial Knights. Now, if you go back a couple of episodes to our Chaos faction focus, we talked about Chaos Knights. And we mentioned that they were giant stompy robots with spikes. Imperial Knights are giant stompy robots without spikes. They're often made of very similar, sometimes the same model kits, although Chaos Knights have specific Chaos Knight model kits, but you can also build Chaos Knights off of Imperial Knight kits, so they have a lot of the same profiles, stat lines, etc. But yeah, the Imperial Knights. Basically, when humanity first went among the stars, one of those standard template constructs that we talked about on the Mechanicus section was to build giant humanoid robots that you could ride around in. And so some planets were settled by people who had access to those robot designs. And because making giant robots is expensive and resources on a new planet may be very limited, sometimes they would have a limited number of those suits available. And so the people who could control those suits would eventually become the de facto leaders, and those would become planets where basically the knights would form houses of feudal lords and then lower knights and squires, and very kind of Arthurian style organization, very medieval but high-tech medieval. And so these are the knights that stayed loyal and in fact rejoined the Imperium. When the Great Crusade would come to their homeworlds, they would be absolutely enthusiastically rejoining the Imperium. They did not have to be fought to be put into compliance. They were very happy to see humanity back, and that's would offer their services to the Great Crusade. And these are the remnants of the houses that stayed loyal. Some of them signed themselves over more to the Mechanicus, because maybe Mechanicus explorer fleets found them first, or they needed more resources and technology to help reconstruct and maintain their knights. But you have some houses that are more independent, some that are tied to the Mechanicum, but otherwise they're giant stompy robots with kind of feudal trappings. Not anything really complex here. And there's also surprisingly not a ton of lore. They are one of the newer factions, and I would say they have a relatively small model count, but the models are also all 300, 400 points, so you're talking an army with 5 to 7 models anyway. Their army rule, as appropriate for people who think that they are medieval knights, is the Code Chivalric. This one is very different from its Chaos cousins. So basically, you take an oath when you field your army on the battle. So you have a list of 3 deeds and a list of 3 qualities. You always have the quality. The deed is something you are trying to accomplish. If you complete the deed, you gain 2 command points, and your oath is considered fulfilled and you are considered honored. However, you may choose to randomly roll those deeds or qualities. If you roll them, then you get 3 command points when you complete your oath. The honored status barely matters at all. There's one thing in the game that interacts with it, but the more important thing is the quality and then getting the extra command points when you complete your deed. The deeds could be pick an enemy character and destroy it sometime during the game. You pick it at the beginning of the game, you destroy that character, your deed is complete. At the end of your opponent's turn, control more objectives than they do. That completes your deed. And then the third one is destroy more units in a battle round than the current round number. So that one gets actually a little bit harder to do as the game goes on. You'll probably accomplish it around turn 2, maybe turn 3. If you're lucky, turn 1 is possible, but 2 or 3 is more likely. Your qualities: re-roll 1 hit and 1 wound roll whenever you are selected to shoot or fight. Not one or the other, you get one of both. Plus 2 inches of movement and plus 1 on advance and charge rolls, or plus 2 objective control and plus 1 leadership. Most people, I think, take the reroll 1s for hits and wounds, but none of them are bad. You do also have a couple of additional army rules because knights are so different than everything else. First off, they have the bondsman ability. This matters for your little bitty knights. In the Chaos Army, they were called war dogs. In the Imperial Knights, they are called armigers. And basically, every Questoris knight, which is the medium-sized big knight, has a bondsman ability. They can pick one armiger within 12 inches and apply that bondsman ability to. So the idea is the armigers are your squires, the big knights are leading them and mentoring them and kind of giving them direction. In addition, you also have access to the Free Blade rule, which says that in any Imperium army, you can take one Imperial Knight, like Titanic Imperial Knight, or up to 3 Armigers as kind of like an allied force. They don't get access to Code Chivalric or anything, but you can splash in a Knight if you just need something big and chunky and stompy to deal with things that your army can't normally deal with, or if you just want to. For detachments, we have the Valor Strike Lance. This is your generalist detachment. Very simple. Your Imperial Knights gain assault when advancing, which is really good because you want your knights moving forward and not losing the ability to shoot with all their guns. And a lot of them are made of gun, so it's a pretty good bonus to have. This also got nerfed day one. This detachment got nerfed so hard day one because when it first came out and when we reviewed it, several of the stratagems could target 3 knights at a time if the knights were close enough to each other. The idea is you pick 3 big knights and they rush forward and they all do something together. That was way too powerful because it just made your stratagems very, very efficient. Now, all of their stratagems just target 1 Imperial Knight, but it's still a generally good detachment. Then there's the Gate Warden Lance. And this has to go up there with the Rad Zone Corps as one of the weirdest detachments in the game. Because this is not like anything else in the game. This is a line defense detachment. At the beginning of the game, you pick 2 objectives on the board. You draw an imaginary line between them. That is called your defensive line. When you have units on your defensive line, if your hull or base crosses that defensive line, you ignore any penalties to the hit roll. No penalties to ballistic skill, no penalties to the hit roll. You ignore all those. And you get sustained hits 1 against any target you can see. And then stratagems play around with being able to get extra bonuses on your defensive roll, or if enemy units are on the defense line, things like that. It is really weird because it's like you have to draw a line, and that line becomes the only thing that matters for your army. Now, granted, knights have very big bases, so it's very easy to be on that line, but it's still a weird army, or still a weird detachment. There's the Questoris Companions. This is a big knight, so everything here, like all your stratagems, focus on Titanic knights, and it's also an oath-focused detachment. So I mentioned Code Chivalric, you make an oath. You have a deed, you have a quality, you complete the deed, you get command points, you're done. In Questoris Companions, when you finish an oath's deed, you get to generate a new oath. You keep all the qualities of oaths you have accomplished, but you generate a new oath that cannot duplicate anything from your first oath. So it'll always have to be a different deed and a different quality. When you complete that new oath, you only get 1 command point. So you can't just like go nuts on command points, like roll them all up randomly and end up with like 9 command points. That doesn't work. But you do get access to all the qualities eventually, which means your knights get really scary by the end of the game. The other thing is all of your enhancements have abilities that are basically once per game and then are considered expended. But when you complete an oath, they recharge. So you could theoretically use them all 4 times a game. It's another odd detachment, but it's definitely easier to use than the Gate Warden Lance. It's just, it is limited to your Titanic Knights, so Armigers don't get anything from that detachment. On the other hand, you have the Spearhead at Arms, which is the Armiger detachment. And that one basically says, your Armigers get battle line, which actually kind of matters in this army, unlike with Chaos Knights, because in Chaos Knights, there's like 6 different varieties of War Dogs. Who cares if you can take 6 of each? You can take 18 and still not care if they're battle line or not. In the Imperial Knights, there are only 2 kinds of Armigers, and so being able to take them as battle line actually does matter. And then those Bondsman abilities can target 3 Armigers within 12 inches instead of just 1. And the one time we care about somebody being honored, it's a 15-inch range if you're honored. Yay. But if you want to flood the field with little knights, which the Armigers can still get a lot of work done. They're still very nasty units to deal with if you are not ready to deal with vehicles. It's not bad. It's just this is not a game style that people are used to a lot with Imperial Knights. You're most likely to see bigger knights with Imperial Knights. And then finally, the Quester Forge pack, which is the Adeptus Mechanicus Ally Detachment. This was a Grotmas release a couple of years ago. A little bit of an oddity. You can take up to a quarter of your army from a limited selection of Adeptus Mechanicus, which is basically Skitarii and Tech Priests. Your knights automatically regain a wound each turn as the Mechanicum forces fix them. If there's a Tech Priest within 3 inches of the knight, they gain 1d3 wounds instead. And then on the other hand, the Mechanicus units just always reroll 1s to hit. If they're within 6 inches of a knight, they reroll 1s to wound as well. So your Mechanicus units get a little bit better. Your knights heal a little bit better if sort of specifically Tech Priests are nearby. And then the stratagems enhancements are all about like the synergy between the two. It's kind of like the Chaos Knight detachment that uses like traders, but this one at least doesn't eat the Mechanicus units. It uses them to just like fix up. It's fine. It's nothing fancy. It does give you access to bodies on the ground, which knights sometimes have a little bit of issue with board control considering you have so few models to use. The downside is you're taking up to, in a 2,000 point game, up to 500 points of your army as AdMech. That's a knight you're not taking. So a little bit of a trade-off. But if you like big stompy robots, but you don't want evil big stompy robots, Imperial Knights, that is like the OG Knight faction. That is pretty solid. I'm not going to bother mentioning the Adeptus Titanicus army. It is technically a thing. It's just much larger robots and doesn't really have a standalone codex or anything. You can't buy plastic Titans outside of like Legions Imperialis, which is a much smaller scale game. So there's really not much to mention there. And that leaves us with one army left. Kevin's favorite Imperial army, going back for a few years now.
Legitimately, if this army was ever done right, this might actually be my favorite Imperial army.
I mean, to be fair, I've actually fielded them on the tabletop a few times.
Yeah.
And this is the Imperial Agents. This is literally everything else. Everything
There's
else
not much
from
left.
No, there's not much left. And everything else from the Imperium has been crammed into this one army. This represents everything from Inquisitors. We have mentioned the Inquisition a number of times in the various orders of the Inquisition. What is the Inquisition? Well, the Inquisition is a very powerful organization within the Imperium dating back to around the end of the Horus Heresy. The Imperium was finally recognizing the threats, both from without and also from within. Chaos was accepted as a big problem, and corruption would need to be rooted out. And what better way to do that than with a good old-fashioned Inquisition? And over time, several orders or ordos of the Inquisition have formed, all focused on different aspects and threats. The three biggest are the Ordo Hereticus. This is the Inquisition Ordo that deals with witches and psychers. They are focused on unsanctioned psychers, and sometimes not even fond of sanctioned psychers, and often pair with the Adeptus Sororitas, who love nothing more than burning witches. There's the Ordo Malleus, which is focused on dealing with demonic threats. As one can expect, they are often paired with the Grey Knights, who are experts in dealing with demons. And then there's the Ordo Xenos. This is dealing with alien threats. Sometimes stopping alien threats, sometimes in almost a more diplomatic fashion. Xenos Inquisitors are known to actually like deal with aliens that are more friendly to humanity. Of course, sometimes Hereticus and Malleus Inquisitors also work with demons and witches because use the weapons of your enemy to fight your enemy. It's a whole thing of Puritan versus radical. There's a lot of lore we could get into with the Inquisition, which we will not get into here, but you want to get into some nasty politics and infighting and different Inquisitors trying to screw each other over, you can go deep into that rabbit hole. I definitely recommend the Eisenhorn trilogy by Dan Abnett, also the Ravner trilogy, also by Dan Abnett, for getting a good view into the roads you can go down as an Inquisitor. And there's a ton of lore on the Inquisition. The Ordo Xenos is also paired with the Death Watch, who we talked about in our Space Marine faction focus. And some of these units, Sisters of Battle, Grey Knights, Death Watch kill teams are represented in this book as units different from their standard codex versions. It's very weird.
It's fine. I know I bought a whole Grey Knight Terminator squad just because of this book, and because of this book, I can field it. I don't have the whole Grey Knights army, but man, this one unit, one, looks pretty, and two, it's useful on the battlefield.
Right. Yeah, and it's just like it can be odd if you are used to, like if you were like a Sisters player, and then you look at how the Sisters work in the Imperial Agents book, it's going to feel a little bit weird because like they don't have the miracle die mechanic, so that's not a thing. Things like that. It's can feel unusual. You also have access to Imperial Navy forces and rogue traders. Rogue traders are basically merchants and privateers that ply the space lanes, trading and exploring, and often including Imperial Navy forces with them to like board enemy ships or repel boarders, or to help them with their exploration. There's the Adeptus Arbites, who are cops. They are basically the police forces of the Imperium, kind of like a slightly more elite police force. Like planets will often have their own like kind of street level defense, but they'll have Arbites, which are basically Judge Dredd. They are straight up based off of Judge Dredd. Like aesthetically, they look right out of the Carl Urban version of Judge Dredd, just maybe with a little bit more eagle motifs added. There's also the Officio Assassinorum, the Assassins. This is another organization that dates back to before the Horus Heresy. And basically, sometimes there are threats that a regiment of guard troops or a company of space marines or even a squad of custodies are not the right tool to deal with. Sometimes you just need to take one thing out. You can send out an assassin who will be an expert at killing that one thing. There's the Vindicare Assassin, who is a sniper extraordinaire. There's the Eversor Assassin, who is basically a drug-fueled berserker who will self-destruct. There's the Calidus Assassin, who is a master at infiltrator, disguise, and even shape-shifting. And then there's the Calexis, who is a psychic blank, who is an anti-psyker assassin. So if there is an enemy witch who absolutely must be destroyed, maybe send a Calexis after them. So all of these things are in the Imperial Agents book. It is a weird mix of a lot of different things. And their army rule is kind of an army rule. It is called assigned agents. And it doesn't give any of these units a special ability because they're all over the place. They're all from very different factions. Trying to come up with one army rule to cover everything would be rather difficult. And none of these factions are really large enough to field an army on their own, although they try. You do have detachments you can take. But your army rule here, assigned agents, basically says if your army faction is agents of the Imperium, if you take Imperial agents as your army faction, you gain nothing. But if you are not agents of the Imperium, or if you are another Imperium army, then you can include a number of agents of the Imperium based on game size and based on unit type. So, for example, there are retinue units such as Navy Breachers, a couple of Death Watch kill team options, the Vigilant Squad, which is an Adeptus Arbites squad, Inquisitorial agents, Exaction squads, Sanctifiers, which are a religious option, Voids Men at Arms, which are another Imperial Navy option. Basically, like all the Arbites, you can include those in a 2,000 point game. You can have two of those. You can have a pair of characters, which could be assassins or inquisitors or priests or a rogue trader or a Death Watch captain or watchmaster. And then a requisitioned unit, which could be a Terminator squad or a Sister of Battle squad. You can have up to one of those in a 2,000 point army. And then you can also take transports as appropriate from this book. So you can end up taking this weird hodgepodge of units, not limited necessarily by points total, but just by unit type, and cram them into any other Imperium army. For a little while, people were using this to cram in cheap Adeptus Arbites squads for taking objectives and being action monkeys. They've kind of point costed those to make that not really efficient. And in fact, everything in here has like 1 point cost if you're playing Imperial agents and 1 point cost if you're adding them to another army. So just be aware, if you're using Imperial agents, it's going to be weird.
Which I'm fine with. I mean, all of the units in here were ones, especially like the assassins, inquisitors, rogue traders, were ones you could sprinkle into other armies before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't feel weird for them to come in, but they didn't always feel like they fit, because they felt like a side character. Like, here's my Inquisitor in a Space Marine army. What are they doing here? Well, it's an Inquisition thing. Don't ask. But they wanted them to kind of have a bigger feel, so that's why we've got the whole Ordos things in there, which I have tried to run those, and, well, they're not as good as just running Sisters or Death Watch, but I still like I said, I've used that Grey Knight squad. I mean, it's a lot of points, especially if you take it into another unit or another army. But hey, these Grey Knights just showed up to help out. I hope we didn't see them. So I appreciate what they tried with this book. And the people I play with in Dallas have said this is the perfect army for me because of the army rule, since I forget my army rule 90% of the time anyway.
So you don't have one.
Right. No, but I like that they're trying something with this, but yeah, they're not strong. This is more just fluff if you want to sprinkle something into somewhere else.
Yeah, it's very interesting because this is a lot of like background stuff, like things that are from the novels, things that are in other games like Kill Team or Necromunda and stuff like that. So they're not necessarily like going to be in canon, like on the battlefield in mass. But I think they represent some of the cooler parts of the setting, so I'm glad that they tried to represent them somehow within the game.
Right, and from a purely narrative standpoint, there's nothing wrong with splashing these in. Like this, and in fact, that can tell a very interesting story if you want to do something really neat. And between Imperial agents and Imperial Knights, and then pick one other Imperial faction, you can do an interesting kind of mish-mash Imperial soup army.
Oh, I already did that once. I had 1,000 points where I had a knight, an inquisitor, and the the Grey Knight Terminators with 2 Custodes characters, and that was the entire list.
There you go.
I mean, it was fun. They died horribly, but
as far as your detachments, they tried building detachments around the various sub-factions in here to arguable levels of success. So the first off, they did break out the 3 Ordos and the 3 major Ordos of the Inquisition as separate detachments. So there's the Ordo Xenos Alien Hunters. This is obviously the anti-alien detachment, and it's built around Death Watch units. This is basically the Black Spear Task Force, only without nearly as many Space Marine options. It has the exact same mission tactics rule where you choose a tactic at the beginning of your command phase. You can only use each one once. So you could give your weapon sustained hits 1, lethal hits, or precision on critical wounds. Only affects your Death Watch units. And I think the biggest problem here is you just have 2 Death Watch kill teams to work with. You don't have all the options in the standard Death Watch Space Marine faction files. So yeah, it's a less good version of the Black Spear, like Space Marine Death Watch. It's unfortunate, but there was a brief window where this was the only Death Watch option we had. And it was in response to this that we got Death Watch as a separate faction for free. So that gives you an idea of how well received this was. Not great. You've got the Ordo Hereticus Purgation Force. This is your anti-psyker detachment, or specifically, I should say anti-psyker, but also primarily anti-chaos detachment, but not anti-demon detachment. So your rule is all your ranged weapons for Adeptus Arbites, so your cops, your Inquisitor, Inquisitorial agents, and Ordo Hereticus models, which are a couple, like one of the Inquisitors, a Ministorum Priest, and your Sisters of Battle units gain ignores cover. And then every time one of those unit types from your army targets a Chaos unit that has 5 or more models, so only against squads of medium to larger size, you get sustained hits 1. And then, like, all your stratagems affect those particular kinds of units. It's fine. I think you would be better off running a Sisters of Battle army that brought in an Inquisitor rather than running this with the Sisters of Battle units they cobbled into this book. There's the Ordo Malleus Demon Hunters, which is the anti-demon detachment. Each time an Inquisitor, Inquisitorial Agents, which is 1 unit, or Ordo Malleus, which is 1 Inquisitor and the Grey Knight Terminators, make an attack, reroll hit rolls of 1, and if you were attacking a demon, reroll wound rolls of 1 as well. Again, other than the fact that you can include the Inquisitor in on that, there's nothing this detachment does that you probably can't do better running Grey Knights. The Imperialis fleet, on the other hand, I think does give you something somewhat unique, because first off, this is the only detachment that affects everything from Agents of the Imperium, although some of the stratagems are more for Voidfarers units, which are your Imperial Navy and Rogue Traders, but this one does work pretty well with all Agents of the Imperium. At the start of your command phase, you pick Eliminate at all costs or Acquire at all costs. Eliminate at all costs is basically an Oath of Moment style ability. Pick 1 enemy unit. All your Agents of the Imperium add +1 to hit it for that until your next command phase. Acquire at all costs, you select an objective marker until the start of your next command phase. When you're within range of that objective marker, improve the leadership and objective control that unit by 1, and they get a 5-up invulnerable save to help them hold the objective. That one's not bad, actually. There's a lot of things you can do with that, and because it works with like almost all your units, that's really great.
When people have used that, any of the detachments outside, like in a tournament or things, this is the sole detachment I've seen being used.
Yeah. Well, because it's the only one that actually works with everything, and it's decent abilities. Like, they're not amazing. I think there are definitely detachments on other armies that do those two things better and don't make you pick between them. But this one's not bad. And if you can bring in some knight, like a knight or some armigers to kind of give you the heavier punch that you don't have in this army, because this army does not have much in the way of anti-vehicle. Like, this is primarily an infantry army made to deal with other infantry. But if you can splash into things that will help you on other stuff, this can kind of work. It is, the most played detachment here, but this is probably the least played Imperial army, period. And then finally, the Veiled Blade Elimination Force. This is an interesting detachment. This is the Assassin detachment. And a number of your assassins have abilities that can be used once per battle. So like Overkill, which I believe is the Eversor ability, Soulless Horror, which is the Calexis ability, and Shield Breaker, which is a Vindicare ability. They can all be used once per game. In this detachment, they can be used twice per game, but not in the same battle round. But also, each assassin, you can only have one of each. Every assassin has to have a mandatory upgrade, which makes them between 35 to 45 points more expensive. They are not cheap, but it makes all of them way better. So you just end up with, like, you can take basically all 4 assassins and have super assassins, and then fill out the rest of your army with cheaper troops for Agents of the Imperium to try to, like, actually score objectives. Totally a theme objective. I don't think this one is super powerful, but 4 assassins is something they've had before in previous editions of the game that were kind of crazy and fun to run with. And this would be the same thing. If you have all 4 assassins, or even just like 2 or 3 assassins, this could be a fun one to play around with. If it doesn't feel like there's a cohesive theme in this army, that's because there isn't. This is just the weird mishmash of everything that was left, that it doesn't have enough models to be its own faction, except for Deathwatch, because they had to make it its own faction because this implementation was not popular.
Rob, you just said the theme of it. It's
What's
everything
that?
else that doesn't fit in.
Exactly. So that's it. That is all the factions for the Imperium. We already talked about Space Marines, and that finishes up all the factions currently playable in the game. Woo-hoo. The fact that it's taken us 4 episodes, and each of those episodes, even with just Space Marines, we had a good half dozen or more, not including all the various like founding chapter styles within just the Space Marine Codex, tells you how many options there are in this game to play. I mean, we're talking 20 plus probably near 30 factions. Each of those has at least 5 detachments, and then all the various units that can be used to build any of those particular detachments. Although obviously detachments lean into preferring certain units and things like that, but like just gives you an idea. One of the reasons why this game is so hard to balance. There's a lot here. I don't think there's any game that has quite this much variety in what you can take, what factions you can play, how you can play those factions. And like 40K is a big sprawling game. Let's just be absolutely honest.
But having that big sprawling options, yeah, might not be balanceable, but you have lots of options to, if you hear something you like and you want to delve into it, there's probably something you can find for everyone, be it like the Imperium, the Xenos factions, the Chaos factions, or even the Space Marines. There's you can probably find something for everyone inside one of those little subsections.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's armies here that are really good for starting players, whether it's like Space Marines, because they're ubiquitous, they're easy to get, and they're kind of like the baseline army that people are most familiar with, to like Adeptus Custodes or Grey Knights if you want something with a smaller model count, or maybe you get classic military things, and so like maybe Astra Militarum is good for you. Or I think when you get into the Xenos races, you get a little bit more complex. I don't know if there's like an easy start Xenos race, other than maybe orcs, just for throwing bodies at things.
Yeah. Yeah, the strategy for orcs can be more complicated than just run at it, but that's a good starting point.
That's a great start. Yeah, that's a very good starting point. But yeah, there is a flavor here for just about everybody. There's armies at different levels of difficulty. There's armies with so many different styles, like just aesthetic styles. Even within something as simple as Space Marines, there's a lot of different aesthetic styles. And then you add in all the other factions. There will be a look, like if you are interested in this game at all, there is something here for you. You may have to dig for a little bit for it, but we've got these 4 episodes, so you can kind of listen to something about all the factions, how they play, how their lore is reflected on the tabletop, and hopefully that will help you find your entry into the hobby. What do you want to play? Or maybe you've experienced Space Marines and you're like, well, what else is there out there? There's a lot here. And hopefully maybe you either heard something that, appeals to you, or something that you hadn't thought about. Maybe just like the hook for a new army idea. It is a new year, new army. That's the rule. I don't make those rules. Dennis, I know you're doing your new year, new army right now.
One of these years I'm going to not do this, but yeah, I fall into that trap of a new year, new army again.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing it too. So I can't say anything, but next episode, we are not going to be talking about, there will be probably discussion of armies, but we are not going to be talking about faction
Space Marines. We're not going to talk about Space Marines, right?
Well, probably there will be Space Marines mentioned. Just by the nature of what we're going to be talking about.
Every episode we have to mention Space Marines.
They're everywhere. But we are going to be finally catching up with some of the narrative stuff. We are going to be looking at the 500 Worlds book next episode. So we look forward to getting that. Sorry, it's a little bit late, but we had 4 of these to get through. And then with the holidays and people getting sick and then healthy again, it's been a lot. But when we come back in a couple of weeks, we'll be here to talk about 500 Worlds. But until then, from all of us here at Preferred Enemies, I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin.
Dennis.
And Richard.
Good night, good gaming, and as cool as some of the stuff in the Imperium is, I don't want to live there.